When I was 19, I casually dated this guy, Casey, that I had met through a mutual friend. We hit it off the first time we met and hung out for hours. He was incredibly charming, and we had a lot in common, but he definitely had an off vibe about him. The day after we hung out, my friend texted me not to get too involved with him because Casey was kind of a psycho. I ignored my friend's warning, which is something I regret to this day. My friend wouldn't elaborate, so I shrugged it off as probably nothing, thinking that if it were that extreme, he'd tell me. Casey and I were by no means serious. He said he planned on seeing other girls and didn't even want to call me his girlfriend. I appreciated his straightforwardness, though my feelings were hurt by this. I told myself that maybe as we got closer, he would change his mind. As I spent more time with him, I began to see what my friend was talking about. He had some serious anger issues and would do things like throw plates against the wall if something wasn't fully cooked in the microwave, and then casually talk about how on bad days, he'd sometimes fantasize about going on a shooting spree if he could get away with it. I finally broke up with him after he told me in a rage that he wished he could shove a fire poker down the neighbor's dog's throat so it wouldn't bark anymore. Altogether, our fling lasted less than 5 months. He kept trying to convince me to date him again in the following months. I obviously kept telling him no. I eventually started dating my now husband. Casey made one last attempt to get me back by showing up at my apartment to tell me that he was in love with me, and if he couldn't have me, then life was not worth living. He said if I didn't let him in and try to work it out, that he would end it all with a single bullet to the head. Since I knew that he owned a gun, I was terrified that he would actually do it. I had no idea how to handle this situation, so I let him inside with the intention of keeping him as calm as I could and texting one of his friends to come get him and get him help. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what happened next, but he kept trying to kiss me, and when I made it clear we weren't going to be intimate, he pretty much beat the shit out of me. Then he left and just left me bleeding and crying on the ground. I didn't tell my then boyfriend about it because I didn't want them to have an altercation. I just made up excuses as to why I couldn't see my boyfriend for weeks until all my marks had healed. I told my coworkers I was in a bike crash. I could tell no one really believed that though. Casey texted me apologizing. He said he just loved me so much that he snapped because he needed me so badly. He tried to frame his violence as some kind of fucked up romantic gesture. I told him to never come near me again and threatened to call the cops if I ever saw him. I was scared shitless for over a year that he would come attack me or kill me, but I didn't hear from him again. Fast forward 6 years later. At this point, my husband and I were married and just got our first kid. She was 5, and we were fostering her with the intention of adoption. We lived in a new state, several hours away. Casey somehow found out I had a daughter. He messaged me on Facebook, saying he knows I have a daughter and that she must be his. I tried to explain that she wasn't my biological kid, but he insisted I was lying, and she looked exactly like him. Fact, she looks nothing like him at all. He's white and blonde with blue eyes, and she's of Latin origin. I told him he was crazy, blocked him, and deleted all photos of her from my Facebook. I still have no clue how he even saw them since my account is completely private. I even double-checked my settings to make sure of this. Another few weeks go by without contact, and I feel confident that that's the last I'm going to hear from him. Wrong. He shows up at the house, begging to talk. He looks like trash and clearly developed a serious drug habit over the years, far beyond just weed. He was pale as hell, had dark rings around his eyes, was all shaky, and looked like he had lost at least 20 pounds. My husband wasn't there, so I was pretty terrified. He asked, "Can I please just meet her?" I once again emphasized she is not my biological kid and told him he really needed to stay away from my family or I would call the police. He then went on a whole unhinged tangent about how we belonged together, and it wasn't fair for me to keep punishing him for not realizing that sooner. He went on and on about how after he found out about her, God told him while he was on meth that he needed to quit everything and get clean so that he could be with me and raise his daughter. I just closed the door in his face, yelled at him to leave, or I would call the cops. He shouted back that I couldn't keep him away from his child forever. I call the police, and all they do is file a report. Then they tell me that there's nothing they can do unless he threatens or harms one of us. About 3 months later, my daughter doesn't come home on the bus. I call the school, and they say she was picked up by her dad. I know for a fact that it wasn't my husband, so that only left Casey. As you can imagine, the next few hours were complete and total hell on earth. My husband came home from work early, and we had to wait at the house with a cop and a detective in case she made it home, while other cops searched for them. The detective told me that from everything I told him, he didn't think Casey was at risk of harming her or fleeing with her. And luckily, he was right. They were found at McDonald's, and he was promptly arrested, while my daughter was taken to the hospital. Thankfully, she wasn't harmed physically at all, and he was apparently really nice to her. Although it was incredibly awkward to have to explain to a 5-year-old why this strange man was telling her that he's her dad. The prosecution in the case was insanely lenient on him due to his mental health issues and drug problem, coupled with the fact that he didn't harm her. They ended up dropping all the serious charges like kidnapping a minor and sentenced him to stay in a state hospital until he was deemed healthy enough to be let out, which ended up only being 4 months. They granted us a restraining order that lasted 2 years, which I was incredibly disappointed about, as I wanted a lifelong one. But we were assured that if he contacted any of us again, we would no doubt be able to get another one. It's 4 years later now, and we've not heard from him since. My daughter wasn't traumatized or anything, she just sees it as a strange experience she had. I still have intense anxiety every time the doorbell rings though. My husband bought a shotgun immediately after this went down. I've heard through the grapevine that Casey has mostly been clean besides being an alcoholic. I guess it's an upgrade from meth at least. And he seems to be less batshit insane. That's all well and good, but I really hope that I never see that man again for the rest of my life. When I was about 6 years old, around 2004, my mom started taking my sister and I to Dr. Daniel's pediatric dental office. The dental center was located inside a giant yellow mansion that also doubled as Dr. Daniel's house. It was honestly gorgeous. When I first started going to the dentist, I was extremely shy and actually suffered from selective mutism and had a lot of autistic-like tendencies. Needless to say, I relied heavily on my mother's comfort and for someone to give me my voice because it was extremely anxiety-inducing for me to talk to strangers, especially men for some reason. When my sister and I got called in from the waiting room, my mom instinctively followed us to the office until she was told by Dr. Daniels that parents weren't allowed to be with their children, as going through the appointment by themselves taught kids independence, to which my mom complied to. Once in there though, this man immediately separated my sister and I, and in reaction to that, I cried because I felt scared. Dr. Daniels did not like crying, so he grabbed me and put his hands over my mouth and nose, shook me, and aggressively warned me that if I continued to cry and scare the other kids, that he would make my situation a lot worse. Obviously, this scared me even more, so I began to cry again. Dr. Daniels had had enough and took me into his house part of the dentist office, where he screamed at me once again, grabbed me by the neck, and shoved me. That's when his hygienist Judy came over and told me if I continued to cry, that she would spank me so hard I wouldn't know what had hit me. Afterwards, he gave me a juice concoction and left me alone in his house for about 5 minutes until he took me back into the dental office and did the work on my teeth. I guess I just instinctively knew that if I wanted to survive, I just had to act like I wasn't terrified and hold on to all the tears, although all I wanted was my mom. After the first appointment, my sister and I told my mom that we were scared of the dentist and that he was a mean man. but she just took it as me being an anxious child, so we continued to see him. Each visit after was just as terrifying. Every time we pulled into the mansion, my heart jumped into my throat because I was so scared. That big house was no longer pretty to look at. Every time we went to the dentist, Dr. Daniels, or the tooth man as he called himself, always had us have heavy dental work procedures done. We had seals done on several baby teeth and plenty of teeth removed, some even with his fingers, with no regards to pain level at all. And often when having a tooth removal or seals done, your mouth had to be opened up with a retractor. He would leave us there with a retractor on for about 45 minutes or so before he came to work on our teeth. Sometimes he would even eat his lunch while we sat there with our mouths open. Probably one of the worst pains I've ever felt in my life. I remember one time when I was in the 3rd grade, I had been leaned down in the chair waiting with the retractor on for an hour. I was in so much pain that I couldn't take it. I sat up in the chair and tried to scream and cry as loud as I could. Dr. Daniels came rushing over, angry as could be, took the retractor off my face, and then took me back into his house part again, where he screamed at me for being a big baby and once again scaring all the other kids. I was so sad in myself because I hadn't cried in such a long time. That's when he took me back to the dental chair, pinned me down to the seat using straps on the arms. He put the retractors back on and said that I would have to wait longer because I caused such a scene. All I could do was shed silent tears and drool everywhere. Afterwards, my mouth would become so swollen and filled with rashes, it would hurt to talk for days. It would leave bruises and would swell up as soon as I left the chair. He would often tell my mother that I was a difficult patient if I so much as winced at his torture. Once, he removed 6 of my teeth at once, and I could barely eat. While he ripped out tooth after tooth, he would often sing songs. It was so Sweeney Todd-like. When I was in 7th grade, I started the process to get braces, and we began seeing an orthodontist. Not long after that, we stopped seeing Dr. Daniels and started seeing a new dentist who was actually nice. I had never known that getting your teeth cleaned didn't have to feel like going through a saw trap. I think my mom took us out of Dr. Daniels' practice when the orthodontist looked at our dental records and saw a lot of unnecessary procedures being done on our mouths. Not long ago, I was having a conversation with a friend about our childhood fears, and instantly my mind went to the tooth man. Curious, I Googled him to see what had happened to him, and to my happiness, the practice was shut down. But also left under his name was a Yelp page that was still up. The page was filled with numerous 1-star reviews from former patients that were once abused as kids in his office, using the page as an outlet to express their trauma. I began to cry because their experiences were so close and some identical as to what I went through when I was a kid. It was sad, but at the same time really validating to know that I wasn't alone. A lot of the procedures we went through were just scams for him to collect money off our parents' insurance. And now that I think about it, he probably was so adamant on us not crying and screaming for help because he didn't want parents to hear and come and see what was going on themselves. I shake thinking about this. I really pray that he hasn't opened up another practice somewhere else. I know it's hard not to blame parents in this situation, but the truth is, this man was a swift abuser. For every bruise and swell we had, he would have dental explanations that would make the parents feel stupid about even asking. He was an authority figure. I don't blame my mom for not believing us. She knew he was firm, but probably thought we were confusing firmness with meanness. To be honest, even recounting this torture was so wild that it actually sounds made up. My mom eventually did come around. She's not alone, as there were hundreds and hundreds of parents that were duped and deceived by this man. To Dr. Daniels, I can only hope that we never meet again. And to any parent listening to this, if you are ever told not to go in with your child to an appointment, something's really not right. When I was in middle school, I took the city bus to school because my parents couldn't drive me, and no school buses routed through my neighborhood. I didn't live in a particularly good place, but I never felt unsafe. Probably because I was a kid and thought of myself as invincible. This particular morning, I got on the bus to take myself to school. 6th grade at the time, so I think I was about 12. But let me tell you, I have always looked much younger than what my age says. It was a decently crowded bus, so I go to my usual spot in the back. A few stops go by, and then a man gets on and takes a seat right next to me. It's been about 15 years now, but I still remember exactly how he looked. Tall, thin, Hispanic, long straight black hair, and sort of a smashed, twisted demeanor implanted on his face. Like I said, it was a semi-crowded bus with maybe 1 or 2 open seats, so it wasn't weird that he was next to me at first. I just figured he sat in the first seat that he saw open. That's when he started to talk to me. I can't remember what he said at first, but being early in the morning and already peeved that I had to share my space with him, I just made vague, disinterested noises at him. Then he asked where I was going. After that question, my spidey senses started to tingle, because obviously it's early morning and I'm a child, so I'm going to school. So I said school in a duh sort of way. I realize now he was probably looking for me to tell him which school. A few stops went by and the bus opened up more, so I quickly went and found another empty seat. Not 5 minutes later though, he follows and sits right next to me again, still attempting to get me to talk to him. He asked my name, my favorite color, what sports I'm into. I look to the front of the bus and happen to see some 8th graders that I know from school, although I've never seen them on this bus before. That's when my animal brain screams at me to find safety in the pack. I move up to the front of the bus and plant myself in the middle of them and basically press myself into them and give them the "help me" eyes. The guy moves again and sits directly in front of me. He asks my name once more, and that's when one of the boys I'm sitting with, G, quickly calls me by a fake name and turns his body so he's kind of shielding me and begins to carry on a conversation with me until we reach our school stop. The group of 8th graders basically formed a circle around me and we huddled off the bus. As we make our exit, I turn to make sure the creep didn't follow us off the bus. That's when I catch sight of him standing in the aisle of the bus, staring daggers through us. Thankfully, he didn't follow though, although for the next few weeks, I caught either the earlier or later bus, just in case he was on it again. And since the bus stop was right in front of my school, I was afraid he knew where I went and would randomly show up. But he never did pop up again. Even now, I'm so incredibly thankful for those kids being there to help me. I don't know if that guy might have thought I was younger than I looked, maybe elementary school age, and if he thought I was young and stupid enough to trust him with more personal information. My parents did well to teach me about strangers and things like that, but when it goes from hypothetical to real life, it's hard to feel like you have any power or control over what's going on as a kid. I'm glad that I thought to join those other children. I'm glad they picked up on my need for help. And even more, I'm glad I'm able to share this story to remind people that scary situations can be less than a bus ride away. So this story goes back to when I was 17. My friend and I were a little buzzed from party hopping all night. We roll up to Wendy's and ditch the empty bottles of Smirnoff Ice as we wait for our food in the drive-thru at 2 a.m. I had no idea that it was illegal to be out past a certain time if you were under 18, unsupervised, and in Arizona. That's when I catch a text from another friend. She asked me to pick up her order, and she'll meet us at this intersection to eat with us. Okay, sounds chill enough. We get to this intersection, and there aren't any gas stations or grocery store lots to pull into, just some creepy office buildings and a dirt lot. I stupidly picked the dirt lot to wait for my friend, who calls me and is like, "Hey, I'm at the intersection. Are you okay?" I respond with, "Yeah. Oh, I see you." That's when she says, "Is that you with the cops behind you?" That's when the feeling of no began to sweep over me, only to discover that in fact the cops were right behind me. Luckily, the car smelled like food and not booze and cigarettes, but this cop knew I was under the influence, and I also had a large bottle of rum that had already been opened that I desperately tried to hide under debris in my car before he knocked on the window. Like I said though, he wasn't stupid, and it's fucking Arizona. No one gets away with a DUI in our city. This cop asked me and my friend for our parents' phone numbers. My friend's mom gets a call to come pick her up and gets a verbal lashing from the cop about being underage past curfew and explains the citation that he's handing to her. So I already knew what was coming. I, however, didn't have a voicemail set up on my new Nokia Fat phone, and that's when I thought that I had a genius idea. I tell the cop that we didn't have a house phone, back when that was a thing, and that my parents only had a cell phone between them. But instead of giving him their number, I just feed him my own. As he dialed the number, my phone was already on silent and didn't audibly ring. It went to my non-existent voicemail over and over again. I tell the cop that my parents are probably out with their friends themselves, and the cop just says, "Okay." He explains the ticket to me, and I think I'm going to get away scot-free when he says that he's going to follow me home. From that point, I made sure to go the speed limit and not make any errors, but I'm shitting myself the entire ride home. Once I get to my parents' house, I park out front. My parents' cars are in the closed garage. Dark house. It looks like no one's home. I silently celebrate to myself. That's when the cop proceeded to park his car, hop out of the driver's seat, and follow me up to my front door. I unlock it and I nervously say thank you, but he, instead of ringing the doorbell or doing the famous police officer knock, follows me into my house before closing and locking the door behind us. He's talking to me, making small conversation, checking out my living room, and that's when I start to freeze up because I'm suddenly sensing a very different energy from him. He asks me where the bedrooms are. I think that he's talking about my parents, but he clarifies, "No, yours." Feeling more than just slightly taken aback, I lead him down the hallway, straight into my parents' room, and turned on the light. 100% thankful to see my sleepy-eyed parents, shocked to see an armed, grown man behind their young daughter. The cop lets out a breath and says in my ear, "You lied to me, sweetheart." And he goes back into police mode, telling my parents that he found me out past curfew and that I'd need to pay a fine and attend a class. I never told anyone until now about the comments he made to me, but my dad did ask him why he was in our house. I told him that I didn't understand that either. The cop had just followed me home and then followed me inside. My father gets out of bed and thanks the cop for getting his daughter home safely. He responds that he was just doing his job. My dad goes to show the cop out, and I follow him because I want to tell my dad about the weirdness that just occurred. So it's my father in front, the cop, and then me. As we walk through the living room, the cop turns to me and whispers, "That's a nice house phone you have there," motioning towards the handset on the wall. In that moment, it wasn't what he said that gave me the creeps, but how he turned and whispered it directly to me, with a gaze that I thought was going to turn me to stone. The moment the words left his lips, he was out the door and walking back to his squad car. And once our front door shut, I never saw that officer again. I can't help but think back to that night and wonder about what would have happened if my parents weren't in their room that evening. I know there are good cops out there. I personally know some. I go back and forth between being freaked out and thinking maybe he was just being thorough. But his comments are what stuck with me, and that sinking gut feeling they left me with. I'm interested in hearing what you guys think. I met my ex online when I was 19. When we began dating, I was shunned from the small Pentecostal church I grew up in my entire life. So naturally, as a 19-year-old, I clung to him because everyone I was allowed to know had cut me out of their life. Why did they cut me off? Well, they believed I was, quote, unequally yoked with a non-believer because I was dating a black man with long hair who happened to listen to AC/DC. I thought they were judgmental, and I was drawn to outcasts because I felt like I understood them. My relationship with him was great for the first 2 years. Although I was incredibly inexperienced in his eyes sexually, he made me feel inadequate. The dynamic of our relationship was that he was 3, almost 4 years older, knew much more about life than I did, and that I should listen to his advice on things because he knew better than I did. Around the 2-year mark of being together, I noticed that he stopped going to bed with me. He was staying up late at night and doing things on his computer. I only later found out that he was sending not suitable for work photos to other women and getting them in return. When I confronted him, he simply said, "Well, are you leaving me?" I was heartbroken, felt like I only had him, so I stayed. He explained that he felt he had, quote, met the right person, but at the wrong time, explaining that he felt like I was his person, but that he didn't get to sow his wild oats, so to speak. I was devastated because, essentially, he told me that he wanted to be with other people. And that's when he pressured me into the swinging lifestyle. It started out with meeting other couples. He arranged everything. He dressed me and took photos of me. He spoke as if he were me to these other people in order to get play dates. When the play dates would arrive, he couldn't get hard, and he blamed me for his insecurities. I felt almost mind-fucked into doing whatever I could to make him happy and leave him satisfied. You might ask me why I didn't just leave. Well, he convinced me that my friends and family didn't love me or support my decisions in life. He was an elaborate thinker. He had a reason for everything. He knew how to play on my emotions, knowing that I cared for him. He spun everything into a way to make me feel like he was caring for me, although I was only ever treated as his property or prized possession. He began controlling how I dressed and started setting up dates with men I didn't know, requesting that I take videos and pictures to share with him later on. I've always been a one-man type of girl. This was so out of my element, and I didn't feel safe, although I didn't feel like I could speak up either. I began going on these arranged play dates with men to make him happy, each time nearly having a panic attack, not knowing the situation I was walking into. One time coming back from a play date, the man had claimed he recorded our session for me, but recorded the wall instead. That was the first time he ever physically laid hands on me. I learned the coping mechanism of dissociation very quickly. I entered survival mode and made myself into someone else to make him happy. And when I was at home, I was me. Until one evening where he told me he arranged a play date for me, while simultaneously letting me know that he quit his job. I was confused. Why would you just quit your job without discussing it with me first? I went on this play date and met a man I would have never touched with a 10-foot pole, who was offering cash in exchange for having sex with me. I was stunned, horrified, and felt like I was living in a dream, more a nightmare. He had quit his job, and when I confronted him on arranging a paid exchange for sex with a guy who I would have never been with otherwise, his response was that it was my turn to provide for us. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and we had only $30 in our bank account. Once again, I felt like I had no choice. This went on for almost 6 months. He put me in lingerie, took photos of me in any position you could think of, put them on escort websites with an alias name, and a text app to text clients. I never was allowed to keep the money, have a say in who I saw, and at the end of every weekend, he would thank me by buying a nice dinner, and then keep the rest of the money to fix up his busted 1974 Ferrari. Afterwards, I would lie in bed and just cry myself to sleep. I told him so many times that I wasn't happy doing this, but he told me we needed to pay our bills. He was intimidating, demeaning, and a shell of the man that I thought I loved. My last client I ever had was law enforcement. They knew about him because he would stay in the lobby while I met clients. They separated me from him and asked me to tell him what my partner was making me do. I lied to them, told them that I was complicit and a willing party because I was taught not to be a snitch or to trust law enforcement. I got a misdemeanor charge for prostitution. I left him 2 weeks later while he was at his new serving job, packed up all my shit, and went back home. This was back in 2014. Since then, I've gotten married and had 2 children. But I recently discovered videos of me that he had uploaded on certain adult sites that have been there since 2014. One of them shows my face in it, with over 500,000 views. Is it too late to press charges for sex trafficking? This was in the state of Virginia. The video of my face on that site was a private video with my ex and I. I need it to be removed. I have a career, and I have 3 brothers, and I have a husband and children who never need to learn about this. I don't know my rights, and I don't know how to handle this situation because I've avoided it since I escaped that life. And now all these feelings are just flooding back to me. He has stolen my innocence, made me feel shame for telling my story, lied on my name to everyone we know to cover himself. He's now married in a different state, but has me blocked on all accounts, although I do have access to his wife's page. What would you do? Any advice? I'll be 45 in August, and this story happened back when I was 19. I find it as a testament to listening to the hairs on the back of your neck. My girlfriend and I were months away from being parents for the first time, and we were both working jobs. I worked in retail as a key holder, and she was working as an assistant manager at some place in the local strip mall. After my shift one day, I took the deposit bag, wrapped it up in my work clothes, put all of that in a bag, and I went to walk the 5 or so minutes to my girlfriend's job. Just before my hand hit the door to the mall, though, a man came up and asked me if I could help with starting his car, that he needed to get to work, but he couldn't figure it out on his own. Now, growing up, my family all had cars like that, so my first thought was, that damn air intake, or whatever, and I said I'd help. We walk around the corner of the mall to where a car is sitting. My first thought, well, that's the car that I'm going to help start. But that's when the guy says, so we just need to get in and I'll drive you to my car that I need help starting. That's when those hairs on the back of my neck start to rise. Now, I've ignored gut instincts before. Truth be told, that's how I was with this girlfriend at the time. But this is a sensation that very clearly is telling me, if you ignore these physiological warnings, you'll be sorry. I quickly explained to him that I thought this was going to be a very quick thing, and I have somewhere that I need to be, and I'm already late. I apologize and walk away from him into the mall. I watch him leave in the car before going on to my girlfriend's workplace. Once she's done with her shift, I tell her we're going to scrap our plans for dinner and make it home ASAP, dropping the deposit bag on the way. As we're crossing the parking lots to head to the bank in a roundabout way, I see the same dude who was in a hurry to get to work, slowly driving around the Target parking lot seemingly scoping people out. Even 26 years removed from this situation, there is no doubt in my mind that I certainly would have regretted getting into that car with that man that day. There's a very good chance that I wouldn't be able to tell you this story. I guess I'm here sharing just as a friendly reminder that if your gut ever throws you some spidey sense vibes, make sure to listen to your body. I have this rather discomforting suspicion, but I'm coming here to ask what you all think. Lately, I've been noticing something off about my home. Like, there's something else there with me, my wife, and our 2 dogs, but I haven't been able to put my finger on it up until today. For some context, I live in a duplex. We share the property with another guy in his mid-20s. He has his own house, and we have ours, but we share the laundry room that leads to our respective backyards that are separated by a fence. This whole situation began around 2 months ago when the neighbor sent me a text. "Hey man, just a heads up. Someone stole my bike out of the sunroom." This is rather creepy for me because to get to our sunroom/laundry room, you would need to hop the brick fence surrounded by shrubby trees and then hurl the bike over, unless the thief had the most massive pair of balls ever and walked it out through one of our front doors when we weren't home. Either way, I didn't feel right, and I've made more of an effort to keep the doors locked. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. I let my dogs out into the yard, and one of them starts sniffing at the shed. No big deal. The lizards are coming out with it heating up. Our dogs probably just chased one under the door. I finally got them to relent and come back inside, and didn't give it much thought afterwards. I hardly ever go into that shed. Nothing's wrong with it. It's just kind of out of the way, and I'm not really a hang out in the shed type of guy. So we generally use it for storage. Suitcases, furniture that doesn't match the house, camping stuff. You know, boring suburban shit. We probably enter it maybe 2 or 3 times a year. After the 18th day in a row of my dogs being curious about the shed, I decided to have a little look-see to investigate if it was maybe a lizard or if another animal had crawled its way in there, since the dogs wouldn't let this thing go. Nope, no other animal, but what I did find made me piss my pants just a little bit. Literally, a few drops. Inside the shed was my neighbor's stolen bike. My first thought was, oh fuck, my wife is a klepto. But I quickly ruled that out. She doesn't even like to bike. Then I was briefly worried that my neighbor might think that I was the thief. I mean, the bike's in my shed. I don't know how to explain that if he were to find out. Plus, I wanted to give him his bike back. I kept looking around the shed, and I found one of our sleeping bags unraveled, but balled up behind a box. Inside the sleeping bag was a sack of what looked to be around $20 in loose change and single-dollar bills. There was also a large bag for garbage, and there was a lot of food wrappers inside. Eventually, my brain accepted what it was ultimately denying at first, and began to put 2 and 2 together. Someone, I don't know who, is living in my shed. Or at least was. Maybe my dogs spooked them off. Or maybe they sleep there every night and leave during the day. If they weren't coming back, why would they leave the change? I left everything how I found it, and I'm thinking about what I should do next. Whoever did it must have gotten in through the spare set of keys that I keep hidden in my backyard. I locked up the shed, brought the spare keys inside with me. Hopefully, whoever it is gets the message and moves on. I'm going to install cameras tomorrow. I'll keep you guys updated if anything more happens. But please hope for the best, and that this person isn't a lunatic. Update. So, this didn't take long. After getting and installing the surveillance cameras around the backyard, I get a notification on my phone that there was movement detected at around 1 a.m. this evening. The notification woke me up from a dead sleep, and while initially I had the thought that it was a raccoon or something else setting it off, I remembered the predicament and grabbed my phone to watch the feed. We don't have lights in the backyard, and the night vision on the cameras, they're a bit iffy at best. But I clearly saw the shape of a man standing at the shed, a rather large man if my perspective reflected it properly. The guy looked like he had a burly jacket of some sort on, and a hunter's hat maybe. I couldn't make out any other details from that angle though. Rewinding the feed just a little bit, I saw him slink over the brick fence that separates our property from the lot next door, before sidling up to the shed. When he realized that the shed was locked, he gave the door several strong pulls before resigning to the fact that he wasn't going to get in. It looked like he pondered the option of breaking the small window to get inside. I'm basing this on the fact that he stared at it for quite some time, but opted not to break it ultimately. I'm guessing he wouldn't have fit through it anyway. After he was done surveying the shed for a minute or two, it seemed like he was ready to give up. But instead of immediately hopping the fence again and retreating in defeat, he walked in the direction of our back door, standing right in line with our new security camera. Not sure if he just noticed it then or what, but he strode up to it, planting himself firmly within the frame. When he looked up, I got a look at his face. A little worn, likely in his 40s or 50s, bit of a beard. At first, he had this blank stare on his face as he examined the camera. That stare yielded to what I can only think was a smirk, before he lifted a single hand and raised his middle finger into the shot. A little introspection here. I know he was flipping the camera off, but the way he smiled as he did it, it was like he knew I was on the other side of the lens at that very moment. And just as quick as he offered this salute, he was back to the fence where I saw his silhouette disappear over the bricks. And then he was gone. I don't know who it was, where he came from, or how my shed came to be his hostel. But now that he knows there's no more vacancy at the inn, I hope he doesn't come back. I thought about waking my wife or calling the cops, but I decided against both. I didn't want to worry my wife in the middle of the night, and I didn't think the cops would be able to do anything now that he's gone. I'll make a report in the morning, likely when I'll fill my wife in on what happened. I'm not sure what will come of this, but I figure I'll at least go through all the motions. This is a story that I've been aching to get off my chest, and I think that this is somewhere to post it under some anonymity. To start, I'm a teenage female. I had my own apartment for the first time, having recently moved to a new city to study. I quickly made friends with a group of fun but somewhat troubled teenagers that spent their days loitering at a local coffee shop. One girl I met in particular is who this story is about. I instantly felt a strong sense of caring about her. She's sweet, bubbly, and the moment I met her remains one of my favorite and most clear memories of her. This girl tells me of a man named Mike, who was like a father to her, which were her words. He wanted to adopt her. Let's note, this girl doesn't have an ideal family. Her real father is in jail, and she has very low self-esteem, as he just doesn't give her the care that she deserves. I soon met this guy that she spoke of, and right away, I thought Mike was great. I was being rather naive myself. He was a scary-looking biker in his 50s, had some awesome tattoos, told stories of great experiences, travel, and seemed quite educated. I thought I was so mature and didn't think it was odd that we quickly became good friends ourselves. As the girl previously mentioned, she felt safe with him, and we both cared for her. We would drive around, talk about everything. I went to Mike crying, and he made me feel better within a few hours when the boy that I was dating cheated on me and then dumped me. I felt powerful having a friend like Mike. His favorite subject, though, was the girl. He had met her a couple years prior by chance at the coffee shop. She was apparently the spitting image of his eldest daughter when she was that age. He told me that 2 years prior, his oldest daughter of 3 had unalived herself, and this girl had filled a void. I felt for him and thought that I understood. A few months pass, and the girl is staying with him. She's soon to be the legal adoption age, when she can choose to be adopted by him, and he is getting more and more excited by the prospect. Alongside her, I'm the person who is closest to him. We spend time talking on the phone, visiting. I sleep over at his house. I hang out with the girl, and I'm teaching her how to drive. Mike was like a father to me in this new town. He watched out for me. He told me that I'm important to him just like the girl is. He would do anything for me. Some of the things he does for me includes letting me leave a project car in his yard, buying parts for it, and helping me work on it, while also aggressively confronting a boy who took advantage of me while I was intoxicated. Now, I'm sorry for the huge setup, but it needs to be understood that I trust and look up to Mike with everything I have. 6 months after meeting him, this girl turns of age to be adopted. I'm now staying in a nearby town, not seeing them as much, but still visiting on weekends. I get a call, and he is thrilled to tell me that she is asked to be adopted by him, and he wants to have a big party and celebration. I'm excited and congratulate him. The last time I saw the girl was a few days before this, and just as our first meeting is vivid in my memory, so is our last goodbye. A few days later, I hear she's been reported missing, and Mike is now gone, ignoring my texts, and eventually deleting all his social media accounts. Everyone is in a panic. This girl is adored by just about everyone, and is as innocent as they come. This is the start of 2 months of major anxiety, guilt, and hurt that Mike had left me with. I thought he was there for me. For some reason, I still don't think he would do anything to hurt her. He loved and protected her. Until a couple of weeks later on Facebook, I see a comment on one of the articles. The police are now searching for Mike, wanted to question him, although he's not stated to be a suspect. A girl has commented, "I'm Mike's daughter. Can someone please get me in touch with the family immediately? He is dangerous. I do not believe she is safe if she is with him." I message this girl right away, give her the girl's grandmother's number, and ask her what she means by, "He's dangerous." As we talk, I learn about a few things. He never had 3 daughters, only 2. The one that I'm talking to is the oldest. When she was a child, he abused her, and the girl who I care about so much is a spitting image of his real daughter when she was a teenager. They had had a falling out 2 years prior, which was the time that his supposed eldest daughter had ended it all. I also learned that the girl certainly had not wanted to be adopted. She had thought this was too much. However, it's obvious that she was being groomed and enjoyed the gifts and attention, someone who would give her whatever she wanted, a father figure, while hers wasn't around. I suddenly am thinking about all the present red flags, wondering how could I have been so stupid? He had talked about his time in the Hells Angels. He had put a man in the hospital shortly before I met him after a bar argument. He spent his days hanging around this coffee shop with teenagers. Now, I have experiences with creepy and dangerous men of all ages. He totally had me fooled. I think of the times he told me that he cared about me, as he did her. The times he picked me up drunk from parties, drank at my house, the times I slept at his. Never once did he do or say anything inappropriate, but he had always been overly protective. The police and news reporters are calling me almost daily at this point, asking me all that I know about him, asking for all the little intricate details. I ignore the reporters, fearing that he'll see me on TV. He's eventually found, questioned, and released. Not a suspect. He then disappears again, and I haven't spoken to him since. 2 months after this lovely girl goes missing, her body is found. It's deemed a homicide. There are no leads and no other info released by the police. Like I said, I haven't heard from Mike. There have been many crazy theories since then, lots of speculation. I don't want to believe he did it, and he's not been arrested or made a suspect, but everyone thinks that he is very likely to have done it. He lied about so many things. I learned the truth from his real daughter, and can't possibly include it all here. I wonder where he is. I wonder if one day I'll be minding my business, and he'll suddenly appear. Something in me still doesn't believe he could hurt me, but something else wonders, could it have been my body they found? The worst part is the tremendous guilt that I feel. I was with him all the time. I spent time with these two. Why didn't I intervene? I'm so sorry. So, old man, Mike, let's not meet again, although I do miss you. Talk about internal conflict. Update. It's been 3 long years since I originally shared this, and I really didn't know if I'd ever be able to make this update. But for those who have heard my story, Mike, which isn't his real name, has been charged with first-degree murder for killing my friend Michaela. I'd like to thank everyone for the support that I've received between originally sharing this story and now, as well as for all the thoughts of hope for my friend. I hope that this update finds some of the people that remember my original story. I follow a lot of true crime and love seeing when justice is served. I had always hoped that my friend would get the justice she deserves for the heinous way that her life came to an end. I'm glad to say that we're well on our way to seeing that very day. I'm not sure if I'm in the right place, but I've held this story in for the last 6 years because it sounds crazy, and I've been told that it's probably best not to even talk about it. I went camping 6 years ago with a now ex-boyfriend of mine. The campsite we picked was beautiful. We were able to drive in through some rough trails. The spot we picked was next to some hiking trails that weren't very far from some natural hot springs and a gigantic waterfall. We were in the middle of nowhere, absolutely no other person around us. We set up camp next to the car, went hiking, soaked in the hot springs, came back and had dinner. It was all very normal, very enjoyable, until we woke up the next day. I need to give some context as to how we slept that night, so you can understand my confusion. Before we went to sleep, I put our food cooler and a stereo that we brought back in the car and locked it. I put the keys in the front pocket of my backpack and put the backpack next to my sleeping bag on the far side of the tent, furthest away from the door. My boyfriend at the time slept nearest the door of the tent, with his gun tucked snugly next to him. We woke up the next morning and I felt fine. I had slept hard, and from inside the tent, everything seemed normal. When we got out though, our campsite was absolute chaos. The fire pit we had made was ruined. The cooler of food had been thrown and food was scattered all over the place. The stereo was smashed to pieces, lying next to a tree. All of the car doors were open, including the trunk. We stood there for a moment, in complete silence, just taking in the entire scene. The woods felt off now. It was quiet and not the beautiful campsite that I remember from the day before. Everything about those woods felt wrong now. My ex accused me of not locking the car the night before, and that an animal got in our stuff. But I didn't believe that for a moment. There were no tracks of animals, no scratches or claw marks on the car or any of the things that were smashed around the campsite. I swore up and down that I had locked the car and went into the tent to grab the keys from my backpack. But they weren't there. We found them later on the ground right next to the car. We quickly threw everything in the trunk and left. My boyfriend was quiet for most of the ride and wouldn't talk to me about what had just happened. But when he finally spoke up, we were almost home. And that's when he told me that he had had a dream the night before about someone or something kneeling over him in the tent, holding his gun and just staring at him. When I tried to ask him more questions, he got more quiet than ever and said that he didn't want to talk about it and that I shouldn't talk about it anymore either. I've tried to forget about it, but I just can't. Something really wrong happened to us out in the woods that night. And for the life of me, I can't figure out what it was. Hey everyone. I wanted to take a moment during this compilation to share something deeply personal and impactful with those of you that support the channel. I recently had the honor of narrating a book for the Audible platform titled No Easy Answers: The Truth Behind Death at Columbine. It's an incredibly meaningful project that delves into the massacre that befell a school and small community of Colorado back in April of 1999. This book was written by a survivor from that day, one that also happened to be friends with the perpetrators of this heinous act. There aren't many things that I remember exactly where I was when I learned about them, but Columbine has always been one of them. As I got older, I thought I had an idea of what happened in the halls of that school on that fateful day, but as I read the story, I realized that I had absolutely no clue, and the details shared in this first-hand account are both unsettling and gripping to say the least. It's a truly terrifying tale, one that needed to be shared, and I was beyond honored when the publishers of this book asked me to lend my voice to this harrowing narrative. Telling the story from the viewpoint of someone who intimately knew the individuals responsible was both challenging and humbling, and it's something that I'm proud to share with you today. If you're interested in understanding what really happened surrounding this tragedy, told through the eyes of someone that lived it, please consider picking up the audiobook. You'll find the link down below in the description. Your support not only helps this compelling story reach more people, but would also help support me as a creator in finding other meaning-filled ways to share my voice. I hope to take on more projects like this in the future. And even more, I hope that just like here on this channel, you'll join me for the journey. Big thank you to all those in this community. I really appreciate you. Now, let's get back to the stories. When I, a female, was 19, I was looking for a room to rent in the city that I was moving to for college. It was about an hour away from my family. I wasn't having much luck, and that's when my mom started helping me look for a place. She found an ad on Craigslist for a room in a house for $300 a month, with everything included. The homeowner was a guy who rented the additional rooms upstairs to other women while he lived in the finished basement. The ad stated that he rarely ever saw the other roommates because he had his own kitchen and his own entrance downstairs, and that his preference for women renters was because he had issues with male roommates in the past, partying and causing damage to his home. We decided to go take a look, since it was the cheapest that we could find in the area. My mom and I went to the house to view it. Decent house, decent neighborhood. The man opened the door and was rather welcoming. He was a middle-aged guy, and the kitchen and living room were furnished nicely and cleanly. My mom loves to talk and get to know people, so they were engaged in conversation while I just stood there quietly and observed the place. He then said that he would show me to my room. Naturally, I start heading towards the staircase to go up, because he said on the phone that my room was upstairs with the other roommates. But he opens another door and we proceed to follow him. He takes us down to the basement and opens a door to a very small room. No closet and no windows. He proceeds to say that this is my room and I'll be sharing the bathroom in the hallway with him. And his bedroom didn't have a door on it. I was definitely thinking, absolutely not. This is weird. But my mom and this guy were so deep in conversation that I just couldn't interject. He then leads us upstairs and shows us the other rooms which the doors were open and says they are currently being rented. He then starts telling us elaborate stories about the other women residents. Not very nice stories, describing drinking problems specifically. My mom was listening intently, but I took the time to investigate further. I looked in all 3 rooms that he showed us, including the bathrooms. There was furniture, but not a single item in there that looked like it belonged to a woman. No clothes or anything like that. Just men's clothes in one of the closets. He had no problem with me creeping around his other tenants' rooms without their permission. I then heard him tell my mom that he has some of his stuff in their closets, but they don't mind. All the while, I'm just like, why the hell would a tenant pay you for you to use their space as storage? I was feeling really uncomfortable and started moving them back towards downstairs as they talked. My mom had mentioned when we arrived that her and my dad were going on vacation next week, but I couldn't go because I had work. He brought it up again, and then I should come by the next week and have dinner with him and the roomies to see if we would all get along. I did my best to put a happy face on before saying sure, and then me and my mother left. As soon as we got in the car, I told my mom I would definitely not be living there. She was dumbfounded by this. I had to explain to her that not only did he lie about the room that I would be in, that I was not supposed to be in the basement with him as well as share a bathroom with him, and he didn't even have a damn door. But also, did she not notice how no one else even lived there? She still didn't get it though, and thought I was just being paranoid. She thought he was nice, and that it was too cheap of a deal to pass up. I had to explain it to my stepdad and get him to tell her that by no means would I be living there. I tried to report the post, but by the time we got home, it had been removed. I don't think that dinner plan was benign by any means. I'm sure that he had something sinister up his sleeve. I'm not sure if it was something as cut and dry as taking my life, or if he had desired to abduct me, maybe holding me hostage in that basement room that had no easy means of escape. Whatever it was, I hope that guy hits a tree with his car one day. Edit. As I've been able to tell this story, more and more details have been coming back to me. This happened in 2011, so it's been quite a while now. When he took us upstairs, there was a wide landing that was surrounded by the rooms. As soon as we got up there, he motions towards one of the rooms and started this long, intricate story about the woman who lived in there, talking about her alcoholism and a crazy ex. He was very exaggerated in how he talked, with a lot of flamboyant gestures. My mom stood there listening to him, and I don't know if it was sheer distraction or if she didn't want to be rude by not listening. But either way, I don't recall her ever having a good look around those rooms. I went and looked. All doors were open, had neatly made beds with dark wood bed frames, bureaus with mirrors and nightstands. There were sliding mirror closets, and they were empty, except for the one that had men's clothes hanging around, pushed to one corner. Nothing was on any of the nightstands other than a lamp, and nothing on the bureaus. I went into the bathrooms, and there was nothing on the vanity in them, other than the occasional hand soap. I looked in the showers too, but nothing other than a simple bar of soap. The bedroom on the left had an empty suitcase laying open in the middle of the bed. This was one of the rooms with the empty closet. After seeing all of this, I came back onto the landing and started slowly guiding everyone down the stairs. They were still talking and absent-mindedly followed me down to the living room. That's when he mentioned dinner, and we left shortly after. I think that's why my mom didn't notice a lot and didn't believe me at first. She didn't take more than a quick glance upstairs, and when we were in the basement, he was just as talkative the entire time. A friend of a friend who happens to work with law enforcement pointed out that this was probably a trafficking situation. The bedroom in the basement is where a potential victim is kept. drugged and abused until broken, before being passed off down the pipeline. I feel as if this is a plausible explanation, as well as the fact that this city is actually a hot spot for that. I'm so grateful we got out of there, and I can only hope that my experience might help someone one day notice the details and make their way out of their own situation before something happens that can't be taken back. And for the record, that was the last time I ever viewed a potential place to live off of the Craigslist platform. This happened when my sister and I were around 6 and 8 years old. We're now 43 and 45 respectively, and it is still something that haunts us occasionally. We had an amazing municipal swimming pool in our neighborhood. South African summers in Johannesburg are hot and long. The swimming pool itself was the ultimate destination. Joe was that adult that was always at the pool. He would swim laps, practice diving, and tickle our feet under the water. Just telling this makes me feel nauseous. To this day, I still have issues with my feet being touched or being wet, and I only realized the connection last year. Whenever we would sit on the edge of the pool with our feet hanging in, he would swim past all of us and tickle our feet in a row. I can't remember all the details 100%, but someone playfully screamed, "Oh no, Joe!" And Joe did it again, this time in a sing-songy voice. "Oh no, Joe! Not again, Joe!" We all laughed, as kids do. Then he tickled our feet again and made us sing his new song. "Oh no, Joe! Not again, Joe!" It became a game. He would grab us under the water and we would sing. It went from feet tickling to chasing us and grabbing our waists under the water. That song never seems to fade from my memory. One day at the pool, Joe tells us that he has this amazing farm just out of town. He'd like to take us to see his animals, his tall corn plants, and his own swimming pool. It sounded like a slice of heaven to all of us kids. He was talking to several children, boys and girls. He told us to be at the swimming pool on Saturday, but not to tell our parents, and we would make the journey in his car. As soon as we get home though, we tell our dad everything. We're so excited. The farm sounds amazing. Our dad says absolutely not. Who's this Joe anyway? We tell him that Joe is our friend at the pool, and he plays with our feet and chases us around the pool. My dad says that actually, maybe we can go, but he wants to meet this Joe first. The next day, we go to the pool and we tell Joe we can go with him, but our dad wants to meet him first. Joe is upset that we told our dad, but we tell him not to worry. Our dad was cool. So Joe makes the walk home with us. We only lived about 5 blocks from the pool, and comes up our steps to meet our dad. Joe is maybe 5 feet 6 inches tall. My dad is 6 feet 7 inches tall, the personification of the gentle giant. My dad is super polite to Joe, asks him loads of questions about the farm. Where is it exactly? How many kids are going? Has Joe spoken to the other parents? Joe, to his credit, was cool as a cucumber the entire time. He answered the questions smoothly and confidently. My dad ended by saying, "Joe, I look forward to seeing you on Saturday at your farm. I think we'll all have a great time. I'll bring my girls though, and we'll meet you there." Now, this next part is a bit of a blur for me. I'm not sure how we ended up driving in a convoy with about 3 other dads and their kids from the pool, but it was exciting. My dad had the map book, leading the convoy to the best farm in the world. We drove for about an hour out of town, and we arrive at this derelict farmhouse. No animals, no live plants, certainly no swimming pool. Just this run-down, isolated, scary-looking farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. I remember being really confused by this. My dad must have read the map book wrong. All the dads huddled together. We have no idea what they're saying, but now they're angry. We as kids are also angry, but for a very different reason. We're obviously lost, and it's our dad's fault. Everyone gets in their cars, and that's when I start screaming at my dad about how he deliberately got us lost because he doesn't like Joe, and he didn't want us to have fun. My dad, though, is silent and pensive. After my tantrum, he says to my sister and I in a very calm, deep voice, "Kids, Joe is a bad man. He was going to hurt all of you. He is the bad man your mom is always warning you about. There is no farm. There's no pool. And I'm so happy that you girls told me what was going on because something bad could have happened to you." His strong voice breaks in those last words. The gravity of his tone and the break in his voice made my sister and I realize immediately that he was right and that we were in danger. We cried and apologized, and he made us promise to tell him if we ever saw Joe again. Joe stayed away from the pool for about a month. As soon as we saw him come through the gate one day, though, we quickly got dressed and ran home. When my dad got home from golf that afternoon, we told him that Joe was at the pool again. The next day, we went back to the pool as a family. We were swimming, and my dad was sitting on one of the benches to the side. Well, in walks Joe. He comes to the edge of the pool and is calling us, motioning us to come over to him. We refused, though. He's obviously getting frustrated, and that's when my dad gets up and walks over to Joe. "Hey, bud, can we have a chat real quick?" Joe physically shrunk at this point. My dad had his hand on Joe's shoulder and was guiding him towards the exit of the pool. I don't know for a fact what happened, but I can only imagine what my dad did and said to Joe at that point. My dad is the utmost gentleman, but don't mess with his girls. After this encounter, we never saw Joe at the swimming pool or otherwise ever again. My dad has always been my hero, long before this story took place and well after. He made sure we were taken care of and that Joe was taken care of in his own way. Both of those things I'm tremendously thankful for. I grew up in a small town in Denmark with a population of roughly 3,000 people. Typical small place. Nothing ever really seemed to happen, and every family that lived there knew just about everyone else in town. As I remember, what I'm going to tell you now shook the entire town for years afterwards. I was born in 1999, so that put me in kindergarten during the spring of 2005. I remember it being a typical school day for us kids, up until the point when a strange and agitated man showed up at our classroom door. This man turned out to be the father of one of the girls in my class. He was out of sorts and demanded that my teacher allowed him to see his daughter and excuse her from the rest of class. As a kid, I didn't know what was going on, but I know now that my teacher could tell that something wasn't right. I don't know whether it was a look in the man's eyes, his obvious anger, or what, but it was very clear that the father was extremely upset. My teacher pretty much stonewalled him and denied him from being able to see his daughter. After a short but seemingly very uncomfortable discussion in the school's hallway, the father eventually gave up. He walked out to his car without looking back and simply drove off. This was something that all of us kids could see from the classroom window. As the afternoon wore on, I think my teacher grew pretty worried given the situation and decided to call the local police and ask them to check in on the family's home. I don't think anyone was prepared for what we'd learn. In a small town, news moves fast, and this was before the internet as we know it today, and certainly before smartphones. Turns out, the father had left from our school and gone straight home. He had words with his wife, the mother of the girl in my class, before murdering her, and then taking his own life immediately after. At the time, my best friend lived next door to that family. My friend has an older brother who was home sick from school that particular day, and while he laid in bed playing on his Game Boy that afternoon, he heard screams coming from the neighbor's house. Not screams from an argument, but horrible, terror-filled screams, followed by 3 distinct gunshots. Then, silence for what felt like minutes, before another single shot rang out. As if this isn't chilling enough, there's another detail that I'd like to share. The police officer that found the 2 lifeless bodies of the parents was responding to the call that my teacher had made. The way it was told to us, he had made it to the house minutes after those shots rang out, after my teacher's welfare check request, but before 112 was able to send units out. Had he been 5 minutes sooner to arrive, he may have been able to stop what was about to transpire. Or the scene could have been way worse. It creeps me out just to think about this, and I feel so sorry for the daughter who was left an orphan at such an early stage in life. I really don't know what would have happened to the daughter if my teacher had not stopped the man from taking her home with him, although I know where my mind immediately goes. I don't know where she is now, but my hope of hopes is that your life is halfway decent wherever you are, girl. This story takes place just a few nights back, and to be honest, I'm still wrapping my head around what I almost walked into. For background, I'm a 23-year-old dude, Bay Area native, and currently a law student at one of the oldest law schools in San Francisco, California. My school itself is not in the best part of the city. A lot of things that plague big metro areas happen to be visible the moment you step off campus. Although, it's one of those things that you know about living here. For the most part, one is able to just go about your day without it being a real impediment 99% of the time. But there's always that chance. So, it's relatively late in the evening, and me and my girlfriend are lounging in my dorm. I'm half watching whatever she put on Netflix, while also scrolling through Instagram on my phone, all while she dozed off while laying across me on the couch. She happened to surprise me when she sat up and said that she needed to move her car off of the street. Parking here, for those that have cars, is not always the most convenient. There's a student lot that we pay for access to use, but being that it is down the block from where most of us students reside, it can be less inviting to park so far from the front doors of our building. Many people will look for street parking, only continuing onto the student lot if there are no openings to be found. This isn't typically an issue, except for the first and third Thursday evenings of the month, because of the street sweeping early the next morning. And as broke students, most of us will do all we can to avoid getting that expensive parking ticket. I was born and raised in San Francisco, and I haven't ever really needed a car. Most things are accessible by public transportation out here, and I never really wanted to worry about a set of wheels. My girlfriend is from a town out in the boonies, so all she knows is being able to drive herself. And if we're really getting down to it, that's the cause of this entire thing. As she sits up and groggily goes to slide on her shoes to go down and move her car to the lot, I see this as an opportunity to do the boy-friendly thing. I tell her that I'll be glad to go move her car so she doesn't have to leave her comfy spot on the couch, and because I'm still more or less dressed to walk out the door. She says thank you, tells me that her car is at the end of the block, and then plops back down on the couch. I stand myself up, make my way to the door with her keys in hand and nothing else in my pockets. I walk down the communal hallway to the elevators and press the down button for the lobby. When I land down there, I step out and make my way to the front door of the building, passing the security check-in desk off to the right. I make eye contact with the night security guy, give him the classic dude nod, which he returns in kind, as I step out into the crisp evening. My first step out of the building kind of floods my senses with city noise and city smells. The sound of a munibus a block or two away, the sounds of incoherent screaming a little further off, and the ever-present smell of urine. Okay, let's find this car. While she said it was at the end of the block, she didn't say which way or where exactly, so it's on me to figure this one out. I start on my side of the street, clicking her key fob to see if I can hear or see the horn honk or lights flicker, but nothing. I walk up the block a little ways, doing the same thing, when I finally see the lights of her Volkswagen Jetta light up in the distance on the opposite side of the street. Alright, cool. One step down. I make my way to the car, climb in, and settle. My girlfriend is a bit shorter than myself, so the first thing I have to do is adjust the seat, so I'm not driving anywhere with my knees to my chest. I find the right spot and go to turn the car on, getting ready to pull off. I put the car into drive to maneuver out of the spot, but before I move an inch, a few things happen. 1, I realize that I can't see anything out of her mirrors due to how I move the seats. And 2, this particular vehicle, when the car is put into gear, it will automatically lock the doors. Something that I think that I knew, but up until this point, absolutely paid no attention to. So with the car in gear now, I go to adjust the mirrors, when, out of the corner of my eye, I see something at the driver's side window. I turn my head to face it, and after a moment of my eyes adjusting to the low light outside, I see a man standing inches from the car, lean down, peering right in at my face. From what I can tell, the dude was probably in his early 50s or so, looked a bit scraggly, and had all the earmarks of a homeless individual if I'd ever seen one. As I'm trying to assess what's going on and why this guy is just staring at me, he mouths a few words. I don't know if he said anything aloud or if he expected me to read his lips, but that's when I said, "What?" He responds this time, in full volume. "Where is she?" Instinctually, I just kind of stare back at him with this look of not knowing what this is all about. Well, I guess he took this as a non-response and quickly hit the window with the side of his fist before repeating the phrase, "Where is she?" The hit to the window snapped me out of whatever trance I was in, and I responded back with, "Dude, I don't know what you're talking about, but get the fuck away from my car." It's at this moment that the look on his face went from blank to filled with malice in a flash. He reached down for the door handle, and I heard him try to yank it open. This is the first time I've ever been thankful for those automatic locks. When he couldn't get in, he took a single step back from the car before standing straight up and raising his shirt to reach into his belt line. Now, I've watched enough shows and movies to know that nothing good ever really comes from that motion. So I take this pause in the action to pull out of the spot and away from this sketchy dude. As I'm pulling off, I hear the ping of when metal hits metal, and all I can think is that this dude really just threw something at the car. A rock, a spark plug, something that tinked right off of the car. So now I'm like, great. I get to explain to my girlfriend why she's got a scratch on her car that she didn't have before. But as that thought runs through my mind, it starts to set in just what that interaction could have been about. While I played dumb in the moment, and part of it wasn't playing, I began to think that she, that guy was referring to, had to be my girlfriend. I mean, it's her car, she drives it to and from school, and if this guy lives in the area, it stands to reason that he's seen her before. And while that's a bit troubling in and of itself, I'm now thinking about how I'm going to get back to my dorm, because I'm pretty much going to have to walk right back by where this guy was standing, and I really didn't want to deal with any more static. But as I park the car in the student lot and hop out, I'm shocked when I see the side of the car. The spot that I fully expected to have a visible scratch from a rock or whatever it was that the guy threw actually had 2 holes that were about 1 inch in diameter. Again, my first thought was, bro threw those rocks really hard. But that's when my brain caught up with me and keyed me into the fact that rocks wouldn't have made it through the exterior of the car. I was looking at 2 bullet holes. This guy shot at the car, hit it twice, and I had no clue. I checked myself for any holes at that point. Luckily, there were none. And that's when the next order of business presented itself. How was I going to get back home safely? Like I said, all I had were my girlfriend's keys. No phone, no means of calling anybody, and the garage is all but empty of people. I have no choice but trying to get back to my dorm being unseen by this guy. I exit the garage from the door that will put me closest to my building, doing my best to scan the area before I have to make the dash. I don't see anybody. No passerbys, not the usual people that I see on the street. Nobody. Which I see as a blessing this time. I take off down the block, running like I haven't done since childhood, in hopes of reaching that front door before being accosted. I make it, swipe the entry key, and press the door open before stepping inside. The security guard that I had seen before leaving seemed a bit surprised when I banged through the door, but after seeing the look on my face and being able to explain the situation to him, he picked up the phone at his desk and dialed the police while saying, "Come take a seat, man. Stay here till the cops come." They did, probably about 15 to 20 minutes later, and they got a statement from me. I told them the lead up, about the shots fired, and everything else I could think of. They weren't entirely dismissive of the situation, but they did seem hesitant to want to do much investigating in the dead of night. They asked if I had seen which direction the guy had gone in, but I had no clue. I asked if they wanted to see the bullet holes in the car, but they said to bring the car to the precinct the next day, and they would have the lab guys collect information then. And that was that. They gave me a copy of the report, and were on their way. I was still shaken to say the least, and when I finally make my way back up to my dorm, I find my girlfriend right where I left her on the couch sleeping. I wake her up and begin to unpack this whole ordeal. As she wakes up, I can tell that all of this isn't quite sinking in for her. Creepy guy basically asked for her. When I told him to f*** off, he shoots at her car. At me. That's when she finally asks, "What did this guy look like?" I tell her, worn out, early 50s, disheveled. She says, plain as day, "That sounds like Craig." To which I reply, "Who the fuck is Craig?" She explains that Craig is a homeless guy that she sees pretty regularly. She's given him a few bucks here and there or leftover food, and he's always been nice to her. Although she could tell from her interactions with him that something was a bit off with Craig. He'd always ask her where she was going, or when she was coming back, or if he could walk with her to her destination. She always said no, but I guess recently, she had started to avoid Craig more and more because of how weird he would make her feel. As I connect the dots at this point, it seems more and more like Craig had some deranged intentions. When he saw someone get into the car, he no doubt thought that it was my girlfriend. When he made his way to the window, whatever his original ideas were, they must have changed when he saw me in there and not her. Whether his original plan involved that firearm or not, I'll never know, but it definitely gives me chills to think about. The next morning, we took the car down to the address that the cops gave me for them to collect evidence. They found two .22 caliber bullets lodged in the trunk. Not that I needed the confirmation that I got shot at, but there you go. No cops have reached out to me further in regards to this case, so I'm kind of at a loss right now. Not sure what to do if I see Craig again. Not sure what he'd do if that situation presents itself. And while I'm happy my girlfriend didn't have to come face to face with this situation that night, I likely won't be volunteering to move any cars anymore. This really turned into a no good deed goes unpunished situation in my own opinion. We'll see where it goes from here. This is a story from my childhood, probably around the age of 10. At the time, my parents ran a construction business. They had several employees on the payroll at any given time, mostly to drive gravel or cement trucks for them. My dad is a kind but naive man who'd often hire friends of friends who were down on their luck to give them a chance to get back on their feet. It seemed like it never worked out well though, because my dad somehow always got linked up with the scroungiest of people. They had a lot of creeps over the years, but I think the worst one might have been Ron. Ron was a friend of my dad's dad, who also worked for us. Ron supposedly had an old work injury that made it difficult for him to work any job where he had to be on his feet all day. My grandpa begged for my dad to give Ron a job, and my dad finally agreed. From the day she met him, Ron made my mom extremely uncomfortable. He just had one of those weird vibes that you can't quite explain, and everyone but my dad seemed to pick up on it. My mom wouldn't let me and my younger sister around him for any length of time. We were homeschooled at the time, and my mom worked in the office, so we were around job sites quite a bit. She kept telling my dad that we should let Ron go, but my dad wouldn't, because he said that he didn't have any legitimate reason to fire him. Now, this is the weird part. Whenever my sister and I were at the office on a slow day, my grandpa would always try to get us to come over and sit with him and Ron. He would always ask, "Don't you girls want to go for a ride with us in the big truck?" Ron himself wouldn't speak to us. He let my grandpa handle that. We were shy kids, so we never agreed to it, but he was so damn persistent. It reached a point where it was literally every single time he saw us there. My sister and I would take turns hiding in the bathroom, just so that we didn't have to be around them. They'd always do it when my mom was out of the room, and they'd back off whenever she came back. My dad was never around when it happened, and I don't think that he believed it. I mean, who would want to believe that their own father is being creepy towards their grandchildren? My mom eventually had enough and told my dad that Ron had to go. A few years later, we unfortunately found out that Ron had taken a young girl out on a ride in the truck and had assaulted her. It was obvious then that my grandpa was enabling him the whole time, and I shudder to think what would have happened if my mom hadn't watched out for us. Edit. To answer a question I've seen several times here, yes, I believe that my grandpa was a sick man and had a proclivity for young girls as well, and he wasn't just an enabler. And I think deep down that my dad absolutely knew it. This is purely conjecture here, but it was a common rumor in my community growing up that my dad's dad had assaulted my aunt when she was a child. None of the family ever talked about this, other than my mom, who was a hero and would never let things go. She'd always ask my dad, and he'd just say that he didn't know before changing the subject. The fact that he wouldn't immediately jump to defend his dad against accusations that are as serious as this, huge red flag in my opinion. I now have no contact with my grandfather or the rest of the side of the family. And to be honest, my life is much better for it. I'm a 27-year-old female, and at the time that this occurred, I was a senior in high school, angsty and steadily into partying. I'm going to tell you about a former friend of mine. Let's call her Kay. Kay almost cost me my life, and I'd be happy to never see her again. A little backstory on Kay. She had grown up privileged, given anything and everything she could have ever wanted. At some point, her parents adopted her 5 cousins, and this is when she started to rebel. Her parents, who were well off, started to pay less and less attention to her, so Kay had all the freedom in the world. At the time that this incident occurred, Kay was 18, and I had just hit that number myself. We were headed to a kickback at these guys' house, and nothing more than a little bit of weed was expected to be there. Now, I was no angel. I had my share of smoking weed, popping pills here and there. I had just tried ecstasy the summer prior. However, that evening, I was planning on staying sober. The night began with Kay picking me up from the house. We stopped to buy cigarettes at the local 7-Eleven. I bought a big gulp, one that came with a straw and everything. This part, crucial for later in the story. We arrive at the apartment, and everyone is smoking, including Kay, but I declined. She would say things about how she never wanted to be high alone. She complained about how I never got as high as her. So, feeling a dose of peer pressure, I obliged and cleared the bong off of her hit, not even taking a full hit for myself. She asked for a drink of my soda, and I handed it to her without hesitation, although she held on to it for a good minute. I had my head turned, talking to someone at the party, when I looked back at Kay and saw that she was messing with my straw, although I didn't think much of it at the time, as she handed it right back to me. Within about a half an hour or so, I start to feel intensely high, to the point that I needed to escape from the group. I go out front to smoke a cigarette, catch my bearings a little bit, only to find that I couldn't stand up. So I laid on the front porch. That's when all of these dark thoughts flashed through my mind. I felt physically ill, so sick, almost as if my stomach was being torn open. To make it worse, I still couldn't stand. I had to crawl to the bushes to throw up. I thought to myself, all of this off clearing a bong? So I laid back on the porch. The apartment was located on a busy street in the city that we lived in. I had this thought about running into traffic because I felt as if I was dying. So I gave myself 2 options. I could run into traffic, have a car hit me, and end this horrible pain that I was in. Or I could try to get some help, maybe flag someone down. I don't know. My mind wasn't in the right state. I had this feeling that nobody at the kickback would take me seriously, although I knew that something was terribly wrong. I thought about calling my mom. I must have dialed her number and hung up like 5 different times. But finally, I called and told her what had happened, and that I didn't know why I was so high. Nobody else seemed to be feeling the way that I felt. What seemed like an eternity later, Kay came outside looking for me, and as I'm puking my guts out into the bushes, she asked me if I wanted to go and get some food. I asked her if she was fucking serious, and all she did was laugh as I continued to hurl. What I didn't know is that my mother had called my older brother to come and pick me up, since he lived close to where I was. He showed up with a machete, ran inside, threatened pretty much everyone at the party. He didn't know who gave me what made me feel this way. It wasn't until I got home that my brother took one look at my eyes and saw just how dilated my pupils were. That's when my family rushed me to the ER, after more puking, of course. My memory here is a bit fuzzy. I just remember asking my sister-in-law if I was going to die and telling her that I was scared. The nurses ended up sedating me due to the fact that I was yelling and threatening all the medical professionals around, totally out of character for me. They did a tox screen and found MDMA, the drug found in ecstasy, along with other drugs in my system. I'm assuming the other drugs, or what's used as filler when you're creating a batch of ecstasy. Now, this is all frightening and everything. However, what I found out a few days later absolutely shocked me to my core. Kay had been to a house party the next night. Somebody there had said she was passing out free ecstasy pills to 4 different people. Of those 4 that she handed the pills out to, 3 of them had grand mal seizures and had to be taken to the ER by ambulance. I'm assuming that whatever ecstasy she used was a bad batch. Remember when she asked to have a drink of my soda? I can only assume that this is when she dropped the pill inside, and it had quickly dissolved. She probably crushed it beforehand or something along those lines. I have no clue, but at this time in my life, I hadn't done drugs for quite a while, so it hit me even harder than it would have otherwise. Kay also went on to tell people that I was the one that slipped her the drug, and she had to go to the hospital. She's a pathological liar and has had to go to therapy for a long time for several mental disorders. All of this happened because she wanted me to be high like her. I could have ended it all because I obviously wasn't in the right frame of mind. This act still affects me to this day. I know it sounds cliche, but I have a hard time trusting people. With this experience, and among other things, I also don't like sharing drinks with friends. I get scared when I go out to a bar or a club, fearing for the worst. I mean, if my own friend had done this to me, what's stopping a stranger? I'm currently in a professional graduate program for psychology and in my mid-20s. I met this guy, I'll call him Nate, at the start of the academic year and thought that he was very well put together, charming, and sensitive. He was very good at group exercises where we practiced counseling skills. He had this way with his words and came off as deeply compassionate. When we first met, I got a strange feeling off of him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. However, he was super charismatic with a trusting face and a dazzling smile, so it caused me to let my guard down. One weekend, we were drinking and watching movies at a mutual friend's house with a small group of people. Nate was very flirty with me and wanted to take shots with me in particular, which my friend Mia had noticed. I was later told that he was saying how badly he wanted to hook up with me. By midnight, I was admittedly very drunk and warm and wanted to go change out of my sweater. While I was completely topless, I caught a glimpse of someone walking by from the corner of my eye. Thinking it was just someone walking to the bathroom, I didn't pay much attention. But then I noticed the person come back and peer through the doorway again. Fortunately, Mia had come to check on me moments before and saw Nate looking into the room while I was unclothed. She blocked me from his view and yelled at him to get out. I was confused because I thought I had imagined it, even though Mia saw him too. Nate later said that I misperceived the situation, and I believed it, simply burying the incident in my mind. Now, before you judge me or anyone else for not coming forward sooner, just know that this man is the king of gaslighting and was able to manipulate all of our professors who are experienced doctors of psychology. After that evening, Mia told me exactly why she didn't want to leave me alone to go get changed. Apparently, weeks before, she had been at a party with Nate where he attempted to take advantage of a drunk girl who could barely walk straight. He would have assaulted her, but his roommate heard what was going on and stopped him. This resulted in an hour-long argument between Nate and the roommate before he agreed to leave the barely conscious girl alone. Then another woman came forward. She was in a relationship with Nate for 2 months and set boundaries in their sex life because she was saving herself for marriage. But Nate wasn't quite so willing to accept this. One night, after hanging out at the girl's apartment, she fell asleep on her couch, only to awake to Nate attempting to remove her pajama bottoms as she slept. She reiterated that she wasn't wanting to have sex with him, to which he responded with what he was doing was, quote, normal and an expectation within a relationship. As she regained her senses, he attempted to go even further before she made her way from the couch to the bathroom, locking herself inside and demanding that he leave. Before exiting, though, he made sure to tell her that she was making a huge mistake by letting him walk out the door. Another classmate, who was emotionally vulnerable at the time, dated Nate for about 4 weeks and said that he constantly projected, gaslit, and manipulated her. When she confronted him about the concern she had about his alleged behavior towards women, not knowing the exact severity of it, he berated her for being abusive to him, for bringing up things that happened, quote, years ago, which is a line that he used on multiple women. And it also makes me think that he has past allegations beyond the ones that I'm sharing. He justifies all of his behavior, no matter how egregious, and claims that he is actually the victim. The only person that tried to stand up to Nate, his roommate, was discredited and retaliated against by him. He made sure no one would take her seriously and intimidated and manipulated her into not reporting the incident and remaining quiet. He has lied to and deceived people to discredit his victims and uses people's personal information and compassion against them. Unfortunately, the professors and managers only see the mask he wears, and they all seem to love him. I'm honestly scared of Nate and believe he is gaining the power of psychology as a means to take advantage of vulnerable people and fulfill his own ego. I know in my gut that he will continue to hurt women, including future patients and students. He has his next hunting ground set too. He was appointed the training assistant of a counseling skills class where first-year students disclose personal information in order to practice therapy skills. Most of his students will be young, compassionate women who won't know what hit them. I'm terrified, so I brought this information, along with witnesses and tons of hard evidence, to the committee that investigates misconduct. They are taking it very seriously, and it sounds like this motherfucker actually might be expelled and unable to practice psychology in the nation. This would be the best possible outcome. But he was tipped off that women in our class, including me, are involved in a report against him. He's emotionally unstable and has a history of retaliation, so that's not great. He has already sent me a text saying that he needs to talk to me before, quote, things get out of hand. At this moment, he thinks there is no way he will be held accountable for his actions, and I truly think that he believes he's done nothing wrong. But he has no idea how strong our case is. He's going to find out how f***ed he is when they notify him of the formal complaint. Then it's only a matter of time before he finds out that I initiated the process that's going to bring him down. Kinda scary, but it feels all worth it. Nate is the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing, and it's terrifying to think he could have become a counselor with that much power over vulnerable women. I can't believe a person like this exists, and I'm glad so many women have come forward to stop him. Update. Reading back on this post is like I'm reading someone else's writing. There was too much I didn't know and just wasn't prepared for. So much happened after this that it deserves its own post. But long story short, another survivor, Sophia, not her real name, and I went forward and participated in a Title IX misconduct hearing against Nate. The university found him in violation of multiple sexual misconduct violations, including sexual assault, non-consensual intercourse, and sexual harassment in my case. For reasons unknown, they went against the recommended sanction for sexual assault, which is expulsion, and gave him a 4-year university suspension. My guess is that they did this to protect him under the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which would therefore protect the institution. Also, the friend who tipped him off about the investigation was in fact the classmate who was, quote, emotionally vulnerable at the time. Turns out, she was a secondary aggressor who was in an on-again, off-again relationship with Nate and befriended me in order to help Nate manipulate and keep tabs on me. We even signed on to an apartment with a third roommate together. A week before the hearing, I discovered that her and Nate were secretly dating and that she gave him our new address as well as other private information. She did so much worse, but it ended with her moving out upon our request, only to move into another apartment within the same complex, then harassing and stalking me and another friend involved too. I was moving forward and trying to put it all behind me. But then a few months ago, Sophia and I discovered in separate incidents that Nate was working for 2 mental health jobs in our city. One of them was a mental health clinic that specializes in domestic and sexual violence. Sophia and I met up with a lawyer to discuss what we could legally do. We decided to file anonymous reports with our state's licensing board and reach out to his work's HR with his misconduct violations. The HR that I spoke to was a domestic violence counselor who had a similar experience to me, so she seemed genuine when she said she believed me and took this seriously. Of course, I know by now to proceed with caution in terms of hopes and expectations. The situation was traumatic, and something tells me I might not have seen the last of Nate, but I'm stronger and older now. I see things through a more realistic lens and have learned how to accept things that seem impossible to get past. I know that one day, Nate is going to slip up so badly that he won't be able to get away with it anymore. I just hope that our work will make a difference for the next person that tries to stop him. This happened 2 nights ago, and I haven't been to sleep since, thinking that this guy is coming back for me. I've spoken to the police already, and they sent a car out to do a patrol, but nothing else has happened, which I'm thankful for. I don't know if I'm overreacting, but this situation really has me freaked out. At about 11 p.m., I was taking my dog out for a pre-bed poop. I happen to live in a semi-urban neighborhood where very few people are out after the streetlights come on at night. As I was walking, a man came out of an alleyway towards me as I walked past. He said, "Excuse me, miss," and my dog and I both got a fright. And then she started going off on him like I've never seen her do before. She's a pretty little rescue border collie retriever who can be reactive to people, so sometimes barks and panics. But this was something else entirely. She was going absolutely ballistic, lunging, growling, barking and snapping at him like she was ready to rip his face off. At first, I thought it was because he gave her a scare, but as soon as I looked back at him, my stomach dropped, and I had an instant sick feeling telling me that I needed to get away. There was nothing particularly scary looking about him, but something deep inside me was telling me to run. I told him it'd probably be best not to come any closer. I said that my dog was dangerous and she would bite him. But he just kept coming closer. As he was saying, "Let me come closer," over and over again as he kept inching towards us. My dog finally planted herself between he and I, and that's when he said, "Do you know where 456 Main Street is?" This question sends a cold shiver all the way through me, because that was my address. I had never seen this man before in my life, but somehow he just managed to pull my address out of thin air. I told him I had no idea where that was, and then to scare him off, I told him again that he needed to leave because my dog would attack him if he got any closer. But he just kept saying, "Let me come closer," as I backed away. Once there was a little space between us and the guy, we turned and bolted towards an area of the neighborhood that had more street lamps and a higher chance of having other people out. But I didn't run back towards my house, lest I give this guy a chance to not only see where I lived, but also so I wouldn't lead him right to it. I remember glancing over my shoulder as we began to run, thinking that if this guy chased after us, that I'd at least want to know what I was up against. But he never flinched. As we took off, he stayed planted. Once we landed at the spot where I felt it was safe to stop, I turned and looked again, only to see nothing and no body behind us. I called my housemate and told her to make sure that the doors were locked. Then I waited under the streetlight until she came out and met me. Even as I'm telling this, I hope to high heavens that that man just pulled a random address out of thin air, and it just so happened to be mine, but I don't like the chances of that though. The game he was running, I have no clue. How he got my address, I'm not sure. Was I going to let that creep get any closer to me and my dog? Absolutely the f*** not. Back in September of 2002, my wife was in her 7th month of pregnancy with our first child. We lived in Ohio at the time, and she wanted a baby shower. Since most of her family and close friends lived in Baltimore, Maryland, we planned that we would travel to Baltimore and have the baby shower there on Saturday, October 19th, 2002. But October 3rd and 4th brought the horrifying realization that a serial killer was on the loose in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. We naturally re-examined our plans, but decided to go through with them all the same. After all, the likelihood of being this sniper's victim was practically zero from a statistical point of view. My wife and I listened to the news of the Beltway sniper in the days leading up to our trip. It was getting a bit more scary, as the death count climbed to 9, and there were 2 additional people who had been wounded. In the 11th hour, we decided that we would still go, but we would take the Pennsylvania Turnpike over to I-70, and then I-70 through Hagerstown, Maryland, then Frederick, Maryland, and into Baltimore. Around 5 p.m. on Friday, October 18th, 2002, my wife and I picked up my mom and my stepsister, and we set out for Baltimore together. The trip was going slowly, but was otherwise uneventful. We had used the time to review the plans of what to do when we needed to stop during our trip out. The plan was that we all go together. We don't dilly-dally. We get out of the car and into a building quickly, and vice versa. No one was to stay in the car alone. Well, as happens eventually, around 12:45 a.m. on Saturday morning, we all needed a restroom break. We pulled off into a rest stop near Frederick and parked right in front of the door to the bathroom facility. The rest area was largely empty, but there was a dark blue, late model 4-door sedan parked head in, facing the door to the restroom. I parked next to it, and we all quickly reviewed the rules. If I were to finish first, I would wait for them, and we would all return to the car together. We then got out and raced to the restrooms. As I ran into the restroom area, I didn't pay too much attention to the car we parked next to, other than to make sure they didn't open their doors the same time we did. The night itself was crisp, cool, and full of moisture. I of course finished first, and then I stood out by the exit, but stayed inside the building. The doors and the walls were all glass, so I nervously scanned the parking lot for anything that may have looked off. Satisfied that there was nothing ominous in the parking lot, I turned my attention to the blue sedan. I travel a lot, so I naturally took note that their license plates were from New Jersey. In the front seat were 2 African American males. The one behind the steering wheel was middle-aged. He was awake and staring right back at me. Next to him was a sleeping teenager. I remember feeling a chill go down my spine as I watched him watching me. At this time, the authorities hadn't released info on the sniper, and they didn't know of the ominous role that a car played in their killing spree. So I was ignorant of the danger that these 2 really presented. A few minutes passed before my family returned and we all ran back to the car. In a flash, we sped away and continued on to our destination. Although I remember noticing something weird about their trunk. My family was poor growing up, so we sometimes had to pop out a broken lock and couldn't afford to fix it right away. So we would rig the trunk to open using a screwdriver. I remember thinking that's what they must have done with their trunk. Although, it turns out, the hole in their trunk was to shoot out of while staying concealed. The baby shower went well and my wife had fun. We didn't go out for meals, but slept and ate at her mom's house in Baltimore. On Sunday morning, it was time to head home. We took a much more northern route going home just to be safe. About a week or so later, once they had captured the Beltway snipers, you can imagine the renewed chills running down my spine when in the newspaper, the face of the man that had been staring at me when we stopped to pee at the rest stop, John Allen Muhammad, was staring back at me once again. There was also a photo of the car we had parked right next to. And scarier still, the reports that they had been captured in the exact same rest stop where we had parked next to them about a week earlier. I can only assume that the teenage boy that had been asleep next to him was Lee Boyd Malvo. Fortunately, they were both in the front seat, and this was where they had planned to hide out and sleep. So it's likely that they wouldn't have killed at this rest stop. Therefore, I feel we weren't in danger during this encounter. Had it been elsewhere, though, we may well have been. Who wants to hear a repressed memory that I recovered in therapy? You do, apparently. When I was in 6th grade, I was in band, clarinet. I wanted to play saxophone, but my grandpa had a clarinet, so that's what it ended up being. The band instructor was this middle-aged woman who I'm going to refer to as Miss Frond, so as to protect her identity. For those wondering, I'm watching Bob's Burgers while writing this. Anyway, I didn't have a lot of friends back then, so I had a lot of extra lessons after school. After a while, Miss Frond started offering me extra lessons at her house. Even then, that made me incredibly uncomfortable, so I refused. She was pretty persistent though, and would offer at least once a week. Eventually, I just stopped going back for extra lessons. Anywho, one day, Miss Frond announced that we had been invited to be in the Christmas parade downtown. Awesome, that's great. The school is literally a year old, it's great for exposure, and best of all, fun for all the kids. We were so excited. We all had extra rehearsals, and the school made sure we had whatever we needed. Permission slips were signed. Everything went perfectly. The day of the parade, we all meet at our designated area. As we get dropped off, Miss Frond tells the parents where to pick us up at the end, and her and some parade officials were the ones watching over us after they left. The parade starts, and everything goes smoothly, at least from my perspective. I was so nervous that there could have been a 5-float pileup, and I wouldn't have noticed. At the end of the festivities, everyone gets picked up, and I'm the last one, left alone with Miss Frond. Miss Frond immediately grabs my hand after the last kid is out of sight, and tells me that I can call my mom from her house, as she begins booking it, with me in tow. I had very little experience being on my own, and I didn't know how to act in this kind of situation, so despite the fact that I had recently been uncomfortable around her, I went along with her plan. Looking back, it probably didn't look that unusual to anyone because she wasn't a very tall lady, and I really shot up in the 6th grade, so it's not like I was being dragged. I kept up pretty well. I couldn't tell you where in particular she took me, but it was definitely further out than where everyone else parked. Her car is the only one in sight, and she begins to make a beeline towards it. It was one of those dark blue-green SUVs that pretty much everyone had in the late 90s. Suddenly, I hear my name being yelled from behind me. I turn over my shoulder and see my mom, panting and sprinting towards us. Miss Frond's grip tightens around my hand, and she only speeds up. My mom yanks me away from Miss Frond's grip, and without a word, whisked me away to her car, and we went home, where she proceeded to fawn over me, which was rather confusing because I was pretty much ignored 99% of the time otherwise. I had no idea what had just happened. Monday comes around, which means school is back in session. The whole day, I'm angsty to go to band because I know that I'm going to see Miss Frond. And while I didn't have a rational idea as an 11-year-old what had happened, I knew that it was awkward at the least, and I wasn't excited to have to face that. But to my surprise, when I get to band that day, no Miss Frond. There's a substitute teacher and the classic TV on a rolling cart sitting in the class. Apparently, it was movie day because the teacher had no lesson plan and had been called in only a few minutes before school started that day. That day was odd, but it was made even more odd a few days later when the principal makes an announcement saying that Miss Frond was no longer a part of the staff and would not be returning. Even more cryptically, stating that if anyone were to see her around school grounds, to let an administrator know immediately. I never saw Miss Frond again, nor did I hear anything about her. Cold part is, I don't even know her first name to try and look her up. Although, now I doubt that we ever knew her real name. As a kid, I didn't have an idea as to how close I was to having my life changed if I made it to that ugly SUV all those years ago. As an adult, I can't express how grateful I am for my mom running and not walking to find me that winter day back then. I still think about this encounter as an adult. When I was about 10, I'm 25 now, I was downstairs watching TV late at night with my mom and sisters. At some point, everyone decided to head off to bed, and I was the only one left downstairs watching TV. I began drifting off when all of a sudden, someone started banging on our door. Hard. I'm talking, let me the f*** in hard. I was so scared, I just sat there frozen, staring at the door like my life depended upon it. My dog was laying right next to me, but also just stared. He never barked or moved an inch, which was odd because he always barked at the door. The banging felt like it went on for a solid 5 minutes without stopping, although in reality, it was probably only a minute or so. I looked at my dog, and I think because I finally moved, my dog snapped out of his trance. He looked at me for a split second and jumped up and ran towards the door, although he still didn't bark. Instead, just started turning his head as if he were confused. I finally got the courage to get up and open the blinds to see what was going on. And that's when I saw this young woman, maybe around 20 or 25, standing there in front of my door, holding her left breast in her hand. She had blonde hair, white skin, and was absolutely covered in blood. Her shirt was ripped and her hair was a mess. I remember thinking she may have gotten beaten up or was in a car crash, something like that. But either way, I immediately went to go open the door. As soon as I unlocked it, my mom, out of nowhere, slammed her hand on the door and re-locked it. I had no idea she had even come down the stairs, let alone walked up behind me. I was so focused on the door and on this woman that when she slammed her hand against it, it almost knocked me back into reality. The reality of not opening the door for strangers in the middle of the night. I looked up at her and I could feel my eyes were wide, and I think I even started to cry. She put her hand on my shoulder and moved me back from the door. She yelled, "Who is it?" through the door, and the girl yelled back that her boyfriend had beat her up and they lived in the apartments across the street from us. Mind you, we lived in townhouses in a cul-de-sac. Our unit was all the way in the back where you would start the turn. We were the first unit in the row, but where she pointed out her and her boyfriend's place was quite a ways from us. You'll see how I know that in a minute. My mom asked her name, and she said something like Bethany or Stephanie or something like that. I saw my mom hesitate to open the door, but after she yelled, "Please help me," my mom opened the door, stepped outside, and pulled it close to shut, although not completely closed. I cracked the door behind her to make sure she was okay, while also seeing what was going on. The woman we'll call Bethany kept thanking my mom and asking to come in because she was scared her boyfriend was going to come after her. My mom refused and explained that she couldn't let her in the house because of the safety of her 4 kids, although she said she would sit out there with her. My mom yelled at me to grab the phone and call the police, so that's what I did. My mom started asking her what happened and what specific unit she lived in. Bethany pointed towards her specific one and told my mom the building number and her unit. I remember this silver SUV pulling up just a little while later, and Bethany ran towards it, yelling, "That's my sister," before she just jumped in the passenger seat. The car sped off without another word from Bethany or a single word from the sister. My mom looked back at me confused and came back inside before shutting the door and locking it. We just stood there and looked at each other. I asked my mom what about the police, and she said she would wait for them downstairs if I wanted to go to bed. I was too scared to leave her though, so I waited with her. Once they arrived, my mom explained what happened, and the officer said she did the right thing by not letting that woman inside. Weird thing is, my dog never barked once until the cops knocked on the door. They also explained that they've been receiving similar calls like that in the area recently. Even worse, the next morning we all packed up to go to the grocery store, and as we passed that building, the one that Bethany said that she and her boyfriend lived in, you could tell that that apartment was empty. No blinds in the window, no lights on the porch. It didn't look as if anybody inhabited it for a long time. Maybe they just didn't have any furniture or anything like that, but it was still weird. He never came after her that night, and we never saw that SUV again. Bethany, Stephanie, whatever your name was, I hope you're okay if this was real, but also, if it wasn't, don't ever knock on my door again. Update. Recently, I asked my mom to elaborate on everything that she could remember. That's when I learned what I'm about to share now. So after my mom yelled for me to call the police, I walked away to grab the landline in the kitchen. When I walked away, my mom said this to her, verbatim. "Now you listen to me. If you're trying to get over on me and hurt my family, I will do worse than what you're pretending your boyfriend did to you, and I will kill you. Nothing means more to me than my children, not my life, not my freedom. I will help you if you need it, but you cannot enter my home, so don't ask again, or I'm going inside and I will lock you out and not help you. Do you understand?" I asked her what the girl said or did after that, and all she said was that she looked at her kind of nervously and said she understood and appreciated the help. That's about the time that I returned to the door after calling the police and heard my mom asking her what happened and where she lived. Needless to say, my mom was a boss bitch in that moment. To preface this story, I grew up in an upper middle class family. My dad was a young professional and my mom was next level, taking care of 3 kids and being a GM for my dad. Then shit hit the fan, and they soon divorced. At this point in time, I was in junior high, maybe 7th or 8th grade, and I had recently gotten bus privileges. I was busing to school back and forth on my own with absolutely zero issues, being an independent teenager and giving my mom a break. Now, the bus picked me up and dropped me off at the exact same spot, at an intersection on a main road which intersects with my residential road. It's literally a 1-minute walk to my house. Now, growing up, my mom talked to us about stranger danger. Yet, despite that, I led a fairly sheltered life up to this point. I was overall a very talkative, nice kid. I could strike up a conversation with anybody, and usually my guard wasn't really up per se. I tended to trust everyone, even if I met you for the very first time. On this fateful late afternoon, the bus dropped me off at the usual spot. I was minding my own business, walking towards my side street, when I heard the voice of a woman. "Little boy, "Little boy, it's cold out." I turned around, and that's when I saw the white cargo van. This woman was practically leaning out of the car. She was dressed rather nicely, all black, fairly young, nice big smile. The cargo van doors were completely swung open, and like I said, she was leaning out. I strongly believe in a sixth sense, your gut, intuition, whatever you might want to call it. My gut was telling me to get home, to walk faster, to create distance between me and this woman. "It's cold outside. Let us drive you home," she said. "No, that's fine. My house is just down the street," I pointed. She was persistent though. The van slowed down some more, and she looked to be leaning out further. I was practically walking on the gravel on the side of the road at this point. She kept on talking to me, but I was no longer listening. I did want to get a better look. I wanted to see what she was trying to hide in that cargo van. You see, she was leaning in such a way where she was obstructing my view of what was right behind her. And as I walked, she kept shifting. I managed to sprint fast enough and get ahead of her. And that's when I saw him. There was a man crouching right behind her, out of view for the most part. I remember seeing his body. He was hunched, looking as if he was ready to pounce. When I saw him, that's when everything sank in. I knew that they were trying to grab me. I'll never forget the face of that woman. She went from cheerful and happy to sour in an instant. She dropped her acting, slammed the door, and sped off. As an adult, I'm convinced that this was a planned act of opportunity. Around that time, I remember that there were a series of kidnappings in my city. All of the kids involved were roughly about my age, with witnesses reporting that same white cargo van. In this instance, they followed a bus and just waited for the perfect moment to strike. I could have easily been one of those missing kids on the side of a milk carton, and I still get chills when I think about it to this day. I was just fresh off of a major split up when some friends of mine encouraged me to use Tinder. After witnessing my friend use it himself, I decided to give it a go. What could go wrong, is what I thought. I spent hours on end swiping and swiping. Some matched, some didn't. It was fun for the most part. And then swiped on Linda. And then I swiped on Linda. Another match. A decision that I'd soon end up regretting. We spoke for a few weeks on and off and got to know each other. She seemed like a nice enough girl. She was a bit older than me, yet looked a whole lot younger. She wasn't fussed about going out for a meal or a trip to the movies or anything traditionally romantic, so we arranged to meet up at a bar instead. At first glance, she was barely recognizable from her profile picture. She looked a lot older and had clearly gained a lot of weight. Already the first red flag was starting to show, although that wasn't a major problem. We got our drinks and got into some good conversation. We seemed to have a lot in common. Maybe too much even. My instincts on the matter? I had the impression that she perhaps did some research on me somehow and was trying her best to impress me. There came a point of silence, awkward silence, where I did my best to think up something to say to kind of break the ice. But she beat me to it. "Let's talk about sex," she said. I was too stunned to get my head around at how forward and straight to the point she was. She asked me about my sex life and what stuff I'd gotten up to with my previous partners. We exchanged our stories, and to be honest, mine didn't sound half as exciting as hers. Hers were rather dramatic. So I just made stuff up. I had never felt comfortable talking about this to someone, let alone on a first date. It was at this point that she would reveal something to me that made me sick to my stomach. She told me that she liked bondage, and that she liked to torture and abuse people just for the fun of it. One story in particular that she shared She said that she tricked a man into getting into bed with her, and just how shocked he was to lie down on a bed full of thumbtacks. At this point, I was quickly slurping my drink, thinking up all the excuses I needed, ready to leave. Then, she shared with me her final story. She told me that about a week before meeting me, she'd met another man from Tinder. She got him to take her to his own flat. She said she was well prepared and had a bag full of items in her car, which she would call bondage tools. To my horror, she told me that after encouraging this poor bloke to drop the vanilla stuff and engage in a little adventure with her, he followed her lead. He laid down on his bed, fully nude in anticipation of her joining him, only to have her approach him with a roll of clear cling wrap. When he asked what that was for, she simply said, "Don't you worry, this will be fun." She proceeded to wrap him from head to toe in this wrap, leaving just a hole for his nose to protrude from, over and over again, around and around his body, to the point where he was practically mummified. Once she was satisfied with her work, she just left him there, wrapped snugly, with no way to free himself from his plastic wrap restraints. As she finished the story, she laughed as she mimicked his mumbles, which were surely pleas for help. She shrugged her shoulders and said, "He's probably dead by now," as she chuckled and finished off her drink. At this point, I decided that it was time to leave. No further point to talking, or staying for that matter. I didn't even want to question if that was some sadistic joke or not. I just stood up and started to leave. That's when she went to grab my arm and pull me in for a kiss. With the reflexes of a cat, I swerved her so smoothly that she nearly fell off the bar stool, giving me the freedom to turn and leave, which I did without hesitation. From the time that I left the bar up until a few days after, I got a series of messages from Linda, asking me why I'd left and didn't I want to play with her, all of which I ignored. The final message that I got read, "Probably for the better. I would have left you cuffed to your bedposts without an extra thought about it." Safe to say, I never met Linda again, and I hope that I never will. To preface this story, I'm a paramedic, and I have been for the last 10 years. Working in emergency medicine, you get to see the weirdest and the worst of people, so it's not too uncommon for these types of stories to exist. However, in my 10 years, I have never experienced pure terror incarnate like I had about 6 years ago. I will not be revealing specific or identifying details, but trust that even without those, this story is plenty horrifying on its own. About 6 years ago, I moved to another city for work. I worked for a 911 ambulance service that responded to calls in the city as well as the country, which had a few other small towns. The city itself was not large, probably less than 100,000 people. Working for that service required working 24-hour shifts. It wasn't particularly busy. Maybe you'd get 5 to 10 calls in 24 hours and generally get some decent sleep at night. This city was a pretty rough place as the oil industry had boomed there, which drew all sorts of folk from around the country to work in the oil fields nearby. One night in January, me and my partner, who was an EMT basic, received a call in the next town over. It was around 2 a.m. when the call came out, and the only information we had was that a person in an apartment called 911 after hearing the downstairs neighbor screaming for help. We responded emergent, as the details were very limited. When we arrived on scene, police and fire department were already there, and we were getting ready to make entrance into the building with them. The person who had called 911 was there and told us which apartment she heard the screaming coming from. We attempted to pound on the door at first to get the resident to come to the door. When no one answered, the fire department got ready to spread the door and make entry. Luckily, the landlord showed up and gave us keys to get into the unit. As we opened the door, that's when the creepiness began. The apartment itself was pitch black, not a single light, as if no one was home. Police entered first, and with our flashlights, we followed. Looking around the apartment, the kitchen and dining room looked like a hoarder's nest. I'm not exaggerating when I say there were literally 5-foot-tall mountains of garbage, food, and dishes in the kitchen, and the same in the living room, only this time with magazines, clothes, and garbage. This meant there was only a very narrow walkway to navigate the entire apartment. Officers proceeded down the hallway ahead, where the bedroom and bathroom were located. One of the officers stopped at the bathroom door, as there was a light shining from underneath. The officer opened the door and just stood in the hallway. With a flat tone, he said, "She's in here." I walk in first to the bathroom. The first thing I notice is the peculiarity of the light in the bathroom. It's a very pale yellow light coming from a single bulb on the ceiling, similar to those old heat lamps that used to be common in bathrooms. The light gave off an odd vibe, as it was just so unnatural. The next thing I noticed is the lack of anything in the bathroom. No floor mats, no toilet cover, no towels, no knickknacks. Just nothing. Empty. Except the vanity, which contained the sink. On top, in the bowl of the sink, were approximately 20 to 30 makeup bottles piled up. Some were opened and leaking, causing there to be powders and liquids everywhere. The last thing that I noticed was the body of an elderly woman lying naked in the tub. As I walk closer, I can see her lying on her side, nearly in the fetal position. Her skin was pale, and there was about 8 inches of water in the tub. Looking at her face, her eyes are closed, and her head is against the bottom of the tub with her mouth and nose completely submerged under the water. My partner steps up behind me. He suggests that we just call the coroner and inform them of the body. 2 officers pile into the bathroom behind my partner, so that there are 4 of us in this tiny bathroom, with me next to the lady in the tub. With me being who I am, I decide to do my due diligence and at least make sure that the lady is actually deceased. I kneel down next to the tub and reach my arm in, put my fingers on her neck, attempting to check for a carotid pulse. In an instant, without warning or the slightest hint of movement, the woman springs up out of the tub with the agility and speed of a feral cat. The only reaction I was able to manage was to just stand up as quickly as possible, and I stood there just staring at her. She stared right back at me, eyes wide as could be, before she began screaming at me. She attempted to cover herself with her hands as best as she could while sitting in the water still. I quickly look around and notice everyone else who was in the bathroom with me had bolted out of there. Not a single soul in sight. I try to steel myself and try calming the lady down, telling her who I was and why I was there. She denied ever screaming and told me she does this every morning, as she has some kind of joint condition and soaking in warm water helps ease her joint pain. Now, at this point, I have my doubts, and I have to question this woman's sanity. I question her regarding self-harm and address what potentially could be interpreted as suicidal behavior. But she denies all of it. The next step is to determine her mental capacity to ensure she's in the right frame of mind to make responsible and appropriate decisions. She answers all my other questions appropriately, and at this point, per the law, she is able to refuse any and all care as she is mentally sound. I ask her if she will at least allow me to check her vitals so that I can be sure she is healthy and I can add it to my report. She vehemently refuses and tells me to get out of her house, which she has every right to do. I acknowledge and have her sign a refusal of service form. As I leave the bathroom, my partner, the 2 officers that were in the bathroom with me, along with 2 other officers and firefighters that were waiting in the apartment, are just staring at me with eyes wide and gaping mouths, speechless. I don't say a word, and we all leave the apartment. Once we all got outside, I had the most uneasy, uncontrolled fit of laughter. My partner and the officers started laughing too. My partner told me later that all he remembers is seeing her move and hearing me say, "Oh fuck," which I don't even remember saying, and then the rest of the party running out of the bathroom. I wish I could say I never saw this lady again, but that would just be untrue. Like I said, after this call, I was able to laugh about it once my heart stopped racing. I figured I would never have to see this woman again, and just that alone gave me comfort. I told the story several times to family, friends, and coworkers just because of the sheer shock value. This part of the story, I've only told to a couple of people because most probably can't stomach it. So be warned, this will contain some graphic content. About 3 months after the first call with the bathtub lady, I'm working with another EMT basic partner. Not the same one as before, but he is well aware of the story. So the day is going by like normal and nightfall comes. I'm hoping to get some sleep as generally night is a little calmer. Each of our stations have a few bedrooms with twin beds to allow us to at least sleep somewhat comfortably. I take off my boots and lay down to doze. I always keep my radio turned way up and by my head so I can wake up if we get a call. Sure enough, tones drop on the radio and I wake up. Looking at the clock, it's about 4 a.m. Radio traffic requests the ambulance for a welfare check on an individual who has not been seen for a while. Both me and my partner get up, put our boots on, and start responding to the address. As we get closer, I start recognizing the area. Before I even see the building, I tell my partner, I swear to God, if it's the same f***ing lady. He just laughs, and we continue on our way. As we pull up on the scene, sure as shit, same f***ing building. At this point, my heart starts to race again. A few officers were already on the scene. As I get out of the ambulance, one of the officers comes up and tells me, the lady we're here for has a friend that works at the gas station nearby. The friend told 911 that the lady usually comes and visits him every day, but the friend hasn't seen the lady in several weeks now. The officer also tells me that there's an odor coming from inside the apartment complex. If you work in EMS or have been around such, you know what that means. If not, then I won't spoil it just yet. I asked the officer if she's familiar with this person or has heard the story of the last encounter with her. The officer tells me that she's not, but her 2 coworkers behind her were on the original call with me and are just smiling, but not saying a word. I tell the officer who the person is and our last run-in with her. The officer just raises her eyebrow a bit and says, okay. So we approach the apartment complex yet again. As I open the main door, you can immediately smell the odor permeating throughout the entire complex. We walk downstairs to the door of this lady's apartment. I bang on it a few times and shout, ambulance. No response. Officers bang on the door. No response. We try to get a hold of the landlord again to give us access, but he's unavailable. Over the radio, I request the fire department and request that they bring the door spreader. The fire department arrives and they come downstairs to set up the door spreader. If you don't know a door spreader, it's a tool that the fire department places between the 2 door jambs and uses a lever to start pressing the door jambs apart, freeing the latch from the door frame so you can make entrance. As they finally get the door open, that awful wafting smell spills out of the apartment. Same thing as last time. Pitch black, piles of garbage all around, though this time it's a bit different because there are thousands of flies buzzing around. Again, the officers enter first, with us following with our flashlights. One of the male officers gets down the hallway to the bathroom and opens the door. He looks back at me, shakes his head no, and continues forward. My EMT partner, who is pretty new, is right behind me. I turn to him and tell him to wait in the hallway and then I'll let him know if I need him. I was trying to be nice and to spare him, The officer continues down the hallway toward the bedroom. At this point, the anxiety is increasing because now we are in uncharted territory, and once again, I have no idea what we are going to find here. The officer eventually makes it to the bedroom. I see him shine his light into the bedroom, then uses the bend of his elbow to cover his mouth and nose. That's when he waves me over. As I walk to him, the smell only gets stronger. I peer in the bedroom with my flashlight, and that's when I see her. The bedroom is set up so the bed is right in the middle of the room, with the head pressed against the wall. So there is some space on either side and at the foot of the bed. Or at least, there would be if her floors weren't filled up to the height of the bed with clothes, magazines, books, food, and garbage. At the foot of the bed are two large 4-foot tall piles of random shit that at the base are probably about 4 feet in diameter. I know it's hard to visualize, but picture two large conical-shaped mounds side by side at the foot of the bed. In the tiny space between the two huge mounds and the foot of the bed lies Bathtub Lady. Stunned for a moment, I stand there next to the officer and just look. This is the part that gets grotesque. Bathtub Lady is lying perfectly on her back, with her arms folded up and crossed in front of her, like you would see a skeleton doing in the movies. Bathtub Lady's skin looks almost like paper. It's dried out and shrunken, turning black and rotting. The level of decomposition from her is one that I hadn't seen before. Her hip bones were visible where the skin had cracked and receded. Her kneecaps were coming through her skin. A few ribs were just barely visible, poking through the skin on the sides of her upper abdomen. And her hair was beginning to fall out. Her lips were all but gone. Her eyes were gone. I got a bit closer to look. All I kept thinking was, if you wake up, this officer's probably going to draw and shoot you in the head. I walked a little bit closer, saw that she was almost perfectly preserved, like a mummy. There was absolutely nothing left of her eyes, with the exception of maggots crawling around in the sockets. From behind me, I hear a couple quiet, muffled gags, and that's when I walk back out to my partner. I tell him, "Sorry man, but we need the body bag, and I need your help." Everyone walks outside to get some fresh air. The officer that was in the bedroom with me gagged a few more times outside, but luckily held himself together and didn't vomit. The one good thing about this is we had recently been given these really nice PAPR respirators from FEMA for a recent Ebola outbreak. My partner grabbed the body bag and I grabbed the PAPRs. We put on our gear and walked back inside. The officer that was with me, like a fucking champ, came back inside as well without a respirator and held the flashlight for us. Me and my partner had to spend 10 minutes just clearing out all the trash so we had enough room to put the body bag down next to Bathtub Lady. Once we had enough room, that's when the sketchy part came. If you've never seen a body with that amount of decomposition, I can tell you, it's very brittle. We attempted to move her as carefully as we could, as to not break anything. However, when we attempted to move her, she was stuck. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was at the head, my partner was at the feet trying to move her. I put my arms down her back and neck to support the head so it didn't just break off. I got down to look as I lifted to see what we were getting stuck on. As I lifted, I saw, but it was already too late. As I lifted, the skin on her back was stuck to the carpet. So as I lifted further, it started peeling off her ribs and spine. We had no other choice, as we were unable to cut the carpet at this time. As we lifted her up, all of the skin came off of her back and stayed stuck to the floor, almost like some sick chalk outline, which is when I saw it. What seemed to be like 1,000 maggots crawling around on the inside of her skin, between the skin and her back. We moved her gently into the bag, luckily not breaking anything. We got the bag out and into the ambulance, where we would then transport her to the funeral home with all of our windows rolled down and emergent. so we wouldn't have to stay in the ambulance any longer than humanly possible. So that's my story about Bathtub Lady. And believe me, I'm sorry for all the details. Best we can figure is that she likely passed shortly after our initial visit out to her apartment, due to how long she had obviously been in that spot. What chills me even more is the idea that we may have been the last people to see her alive before she left this world. I don't know if it would have changed a thing if she opted to let us check her out that time, but it's still very hard for me not to wonder. When I was in my very early 20s, I lived in some pretty shitty apartments that were known for being a little sketchy for the area. This happened in the United States, by the way. There was this neighbor that always seemed to be listening to James Brown and Motown, so even though he seemed a bit off, I thought, how could he be that weird if he's chilling to some old school music? I'd hear him blast his music and have louder conversations, but then again, we both had studio apartments that were touching, so I just would play music to not hear his so loudly. One night, he was drinking a lot and had his girlfriend around. You could hear him getting belligerent, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary for him, I suppose. It wasn't too late, so I headed out for the night with some friends of mine while my boyfriend at the time stayed in. I got dropped off at home around 1 a.m. or so, and as we were driving into the parking lot from afar, we see my neighbor outside in between cars, looking sort of odd. Okay, weird, whatever. This guy is just kind of creepy that way anyway. At that point, my friends were more weirded out than I was, but I didn't think much of it and had them drop me off near the entrance because it would be easier for them to leave that way. That was until they drove away and I walked up to go into my apartment, which I had to pass his first. I swear, my heart dropped because he was standing still by then, with his body hidden by the bush that's between our apartments, like the funny Homer Simpson meme, but actually not funny whatsoever, because as I approached, it seemed like he thought maybe I didn't see him because it was so dark out, and he was standing as still as a statue. I waved and mumbled hi because I freaking see you, and I'm not going to pretend that I don't at this point, so don't even try anything. At that point, after acknowledging he was there, he stepped out from the side of the bush and came into the dim porch light. And never in my life have I looked into eyes like that. My heart is racing as I tell this. They were widened, dark, fully dilated, just like you'd expect a wild animal to be. Almost lunatic, if I were to express his energy as well. He didn't say anything, but he did give me a bone-chilling look, and I scampered off into my apartment immediately. My boyfriend was drowsy since it was late, but he did say the neighbor's music was loud and continued for some time, and he heard a ton of noise and arguing earlier in the night, but didn't think much of it. That evening, all night, we heard thumps, and it just sounded like furniture was moving. It weirded me out even more knowing that he was awake in that state that I had viewed him in, which seemed almost primal. The next morning, I wake up and I hear cops outside banging on his door, and was partially relieved to see them, but then super scared of why they were there in the first place. They took him away in handcuffs shortly after demanding to be let in, and asked me the last time I had talked to or seen the neighbor. I told them about the night before, the arguing, noises, and the frightening encounter that he hit me with when I got home. What I found out during the next day will forever make my stomach turn. I was told this from the groundskeeper of our building, and the details I'll keep simple since it was rather horrendous. The Motown James Brown listening neighbor had brutally murdered his girlfriend that night, dismembered parts of her, and dragged the rest of her body near the train tracks, which were directly behind our apartments. It hit me that the cold, primal, and wide-eyed look that I had seen on that man's face was that of a person who had just taken another human being's life, in such a vicious, disgusting way at that. I felt utterly terrible for this woman, who did not deserve to go out like that. She was always quiet and sweet, and seemed a bit down on her luck, usually asking me for cigarettes when I encountered her.
To this day, my heart aches thinking about how close I was to death, quite literally, and how he could have ambushed me out of insanity, since he was just waiting in the darkness when I walked up. To all of you who get that intuition or gut feeling, listen to it. If you have a bad feeling about someone, even if they seem harmless, stay a safe distance from them. I moved into a different apartment right after this because it was too much thinking about what had happened. How someone was murdered no more than 6 inches beyond a wall from where I laid my head at night. That neighbor went to jail, and I saw his booking photo, which was so damn scary to see. I don't know about court or trials or anything like that. I just hope this man stays behind bars, because that is where he truly belongs. This story happened to me back when I was in college in 2017. I lived in a neighborhood near the university campus, as well as near the river. My apartment is actually a fourplex with my place and 3 other rentable units. The area itself is generally safe, but at the time, our neighbors whom we shared a wall with were a real piece of work. Our neighbors were a single mother struggling with addiction, her college-age son, who was a creep on his own and had a record of SA. The son and mom were constantly fighting, and we could hear them yelling at each other through the wall sometimes. We also believed they were dealing drugs, given that some pretty shady people would come through every now and again. The son would have people come over, drive around the block with them, and then get dropped back off within a span of 5 minutes. Sometimes, some of their friends would mistake our apartment for theirs. On one occasion, a man came pounding on our door at dusk, accusing someone of assault and threatening to kill us if we didn't send so-and-so outside. Apparently, he did this on every door in the apartment complex. We called the police, and once they came out, they told all of the residents that the guy was in some state of a drug-induced mania. Whether it was related to the neighbors or not, I don't know for sure. I've lived in this same apartment for about 7 years now, and a lot of craziness happened in the 3 years while we had these same neighbors. But there was one time that truly made my blood run cold. I lived with my best friend and her boyfriend at the time of the specific incident I'm about to share. Our unit has an upstairs and downstairs, with the bedrooms both being up and the kitchen and living room being down. One warm summer day, my friends and I decided to float the river to escape the 100+ degree weather. We were all young, 21 to 23, and loved to party. On that particular day, we finished a bottle of vodka on the river between the 5 of us, and I had probably drank the most. Because I live close to the river, we can get off the river at my street and just walk to my place. That day, we got off the river at around 5 p.m. I was pretty hammered, so my friends dropped me off at my place to sleep, as they decided to go to another friend's house who had a pool, all in efforts to keep the party going. I woke up a few hours later and checked my phone. It was nearly midnight at this point. My house was entirely quiet and dark. Both my head and stomach were hurting from the alcohol, so I decided to fix it by chugging some water and following up with a midnight snack. I sleepily walked down my stairs, using my cell phone as a light. I'm not sure why I didn't turn on any lights, but when I got downstairs, I saw my roommate asleep on the couch. I walked into the kitchen, and the overhead oven light that we keep on provided enough light for me to make a snack. I opened the fridge and first searched for my leftover takeout from lunch that day. My head pounded as I quietly cursed my roommates for eating my takeout, but ultimately decided to fry myself a couple of eggs and eat a piece of toast. I smashed some water and began to feel a bit better. I texted my friends, and even though it was midnight, they were all still up and hanging out at my friend's house who had the pool. They told me to come over, and after my nap and snack, I had sobered up enough to drive. I walked back through my living room and was on my way back up the stairs to grab my shoes when I saw something that made me freeze. I had taken another glance at the sleeping figure of my roommate on the couch, only to realize that it wasn't my roommate. My female roommate, who I thought it was, is a 110-pound 22-year-old with long red hair. This person looked to be about 170 pounds, brunette, and a woman that appeared to be in her late 30s. Obviously, not a college student that would be more common to the area, and obviously not a resident of my apartment. She was face down and had nothing covering her body but her street clothes. For a solid couple of minutes, I couldn't move a muscle. I just stared at what I could see of her face and saw that she was breathing the shallow breath of someone who was fast asleep. Without my shoes on, I slipped outside the front door and immediately called my roommates. Neither one of them answered, so I chalked it up to just being a friend of theirs that I hadn't met. I went to my friend's house and tried to forget the incident. I was hanging out like nothing happened when my roommate finally called back. The conversation went something like this.
Hey, sorry I missed your call. What's up?
Oh, nothing. I was just going to ask you about your friend sleeping on our couch.
What? On our couch?
Yeah, the woman sleeping on our couch. Older, darker hair.
We aren't at the house. We decided to stay at the boyfriend's parents' house tonight.
My heart all but sank at that point. That's when my roommates decided to head back over to our place to investigate. But by the time they had gotten home, whoever that person was, they had left. Nothing in our place was missing except for my takeout. Best we could conclude after the fact is that the woman was heavily intoxicated and confused our house for one of the other apartments in our complex. She ate some of our food and decided to take herself a nap. She had also thrown up on our carpet and used a quilt that my grandmother had handmade to cover it up. Not the greatest of thanks for providing someone a warm and quiet place to catch some sleep. This woman was ultimately harmless, but the wrong person could have easily sauntered into our apartment. And given the character of our neighbors, it could have been much worse. My roommates and I had a serious talk about locking the doors every single time we leave the house. I still think about seeing that woman's body on my couch sometimes, and it always gives me that same chill. This takes place in the rural farmland of the southeastern United States. For those from around the area, you will know that there isn't much around except for old farmhouses, fields, and the occasional subdivision. When I was around 17 or 18, I was dating this girl who went to the same high school as me. Being teenagers, we needed a place to be alone, and what better place than the front seat of my F-150. Oftentimes, it was hard to find a place to park that was away from the road and was far enough away from everyone. One evening, as the sun was getting ready to set, I remembered an abandoned house with a long driveway and a tobacco barn off some old back road with no other houses around. I had been there before and explored the property. The house itself had been abandoned long ago and currently looked as if it was being used to store lumber. The house had no doors or windows left, and the rest of the property was clearly in disrepair and didn't appear to be used at all. I figured this long-forgotten property would make a good spot, so I drove my truck up onto the driveway, far away from prying eyes. I put my truck in park, lifted up my center console, and put on the radio. As my girlfriend and I were talking, she suddenly stops, with her eyes glued to the rearview mirror, and says, I think someone is here. I initially blew her off as I was fairly confident that no one was around for miles, but I glanced in my rear view to see a very beat-up looking Ford truck that had pulled directly behind mine just as the door flew open. Out jumped a tall, dirty-looking man holding what appeared to be a .30-06 with a weathered wooden stock. As I put my window down, the man advances, yelling all types of obscenities from the side of my truck. As he walks up, I hear the distinct sound of the safety clicking off of an older rifle. I froze as the world stopped around me. I had never been held at gunpoint before. As soon as the shock wore off, I threw my hands up and I see the man had his sights aimed on me through the rear window of my truck. I looked over to my girlfriend, who was frozen in shock, and somewhat cowered into the passenger side door. I remember feeling helpless and reaching for my pistol that I usually had between the seats, which I quickly realized I had left at home. This was probably a blessing in disguise, as the strange man was clearly belligerent and under the influence of something. I'm sure him seeing my pistol would have just sent him more over the edge. As my hands are up and my girlfriend is shaking in fear, I eventually mutter out, "What's going on, sir?" The man, through rotten and missing teeth, shouts, "You sons of bitches come out here tearing up my field and ruining my crops." He clearly had mistaken me for some of the ATV riders around the area who would often wander onto private property and tear up the land. Looking dead at this man, he didn't look like any of the farmers I had known around the area, having lived here 15 years at this point. I was fairly familiar with the local farmers. This supposed farmer looked maybe to be in his early 30s and looked to me more like the junkies I would see downtown. I replied to the man that I had never been here before, nor that I was responsible for destroying his crops, trying desperately to defuse the situation. He wanted to hear none of it and continued to mutter while still holding me at gunpoint. I waited for a break in his incoherent babbling to apologize profusely and say, "Sir, if I had seen a no trespassing sign, I wouldn't have dared step foot on the property." The man advanced from behind my truck to my open window to yell, "Didn't see no fucking sign?" I knew he didn't believe me. As I studied him, he continued to grip the rifle tighter and tighter while mumbling to himself. I apologized some more and offered to leave when I noticed he has me completely blocked in. There was nowhere to go. As soon as I mentioned leaving, though, he perked up and dropped the rifle ever so slightly, putting us out of immediate danger. My fight or flight briefly chose fight, but I knew there was no way to jump out of the truck and get to him before he could shoot. Time seemed to slow, and I felt like the silence that ensued lasted for hours. He started to yell obscenities again, but started to walk back to his truck at the same time. As he passes my rear bumper, my girlfriend and I exchanged glances. I had never seen a fear like that in someone's eyes before, let alone someone I loved. I knew I had to do whatever I could to get away from this unhinged stranger. I fired up my truck and put it in reverse as he does the same. The beat-up Ford backed into the road and stopped, waiting for me to exit. I backed into the road as well, my eyes never leaving the rearview mirror. As soon as there was enough space, I threw the truck into drive and stomped the gas pedal down as far as it would go. My tires squealed, and the truck roared as it ran through its gears. I was familiar with the roads here and was confident that I could outrun him if need be, as his truck looked like it was on its last leg. As the speedometer flew past 60, I could see the man following us, but there was enough distance from my truck that it would be hard to put a hole in my tailgate. My girlfriend is calming down at this point and is trying to rationalize what just happened to us. I drove and drove for several miles, constantly looking behind to see if this man was still following. I briefly remember doing over 100 miles an hour at some point. The mood in the cab changed to utter disbelief as we talk about how crazy the supposed farmer looked and awkwardly laughing off our near deaths. I never saw that man again after that and never returned to that abandoned house, except for the next day to leave him some ruts in the front yard of the rundown property. Looking back, I haven't the slightest idea as to how the man knew we were there, as we weren't visible from the road, nor were we followed. I personally think he was just some tweaker, as I knew most all of the farmers in the area, and being in a small town, you tend to know everybody. I hadn't seen this man in my life, nor have I been lucky enough to see him since. I certainly was in the wrong for being on private property, and had heard horror stories of people running from crazed farmers as bullets flew over their heads. However, a couple of kids parked up in what was clearly a forgotten property, several hundred yards from the nearest field, shouldn't have warranted a firearm pointed at me and my girlfriend, who were sitting in a clean truck that obviously hadn't been tearing up any fields. Coming from a farming family myself, and being close with the farmers in the area, the last thing you would catch me doing is tearing up someone's livelihood. Regardless, I put my girlfriend's and my life at stake just to park up somewhere and fool around. I never made that mistake again. I used to fight with my parents a lot as a teenager, and that led to them kicking me out once I had graduated high school. I was almost 19 at this point, which for me wasn't a huge problem. I had my own job and my own car, and my friends' parents had a spare bedroom they were willing to let me rent out, so things seemed to work out just fine. That being said, I'm going to change everybody's name in this story for privacy's sake. We'll call my friend Kelly and her mom Lena and her dad Kenneth. Kenneth and Lena had a lot of weird friends due to the fact that they were huge partiers. A lot of these friends were actually really nice people, just a touch weird, and you could tell they had issues such as drugs or criminal pasts. There was this one guy though that was beyond weird, just someone who, even though I didn't know him, absolutely made my skin crawl. We'll call him Joe. I came home from work one day, and the only person at the house was Joe. As soon as I walked in, he says hello, and then made a comment about how beautiful I was. Now, I don't personally consider myself good looking in the slightest. I'm decent, even average at best. So I just kind of said thanks and walked off to do my normal routine. As I was making my lunch and cleaning up my mess, I felt the feeling of someone staring at me. It was Joe. He'd followed me into the kitchen and was standing in the only doorway, just staring right at me. I asked if I could get him anything, but he just shook his head no and continued right on staring. This made me very uncomfortable to say the least, so I just kind of nudged past him and headed straight to my room, locking the door until I heard my roommates get home. I guess Joe left around dinner time, and I thought it was fine and went about my nightly routine, went to bed as usual. But he must have come back because he was sitting at the breakfast table when I went to go get my cereal that morning. Again, the whole time, he just stared. Having enough of that, I stood up, took my Fruit Loops to my room. Friday night rolled around. Lena, Kenneth, and Kelly told me they were going to throw a huge party, and I should invite whoever I wanted. I just had this feeling that Joe would be there, so I decided to invite the most intimidating guy friend that I had, my neighbor, Charles. Now, Charles was a huge guy, 6'5" at least, and I'd guess close to 300 pounds. Charles was also covered nearly head to toe in tattoos, and was a previous Hells Angels member. But he was also the type that, unless provoked, wouldn't hurt a fly. I explained while inviting him the day before about Joe. When Charles heard Joe's name, his eyes grew a little wide and he took a big, deep breath before letting out a sigh. He said that he knew Joe, and that Joe was currently on the run from the police for SAing a teenage girl the year before. Charles said without any doubt in his voice that I needed to stay far away from Joe. You think that's where the scary part ends? No, it gets worse. Now, I'm usually not a cop caller, but I went straight home and packed my things and headed out to a safe place before calling the police. When they arrested Joe, they looked through his phone, and he had multiple pictures of me on it. Most of them came from when I was sleeping or when I was in the shower. He also had texts to another person about me, and more chilling, about what he and this other person wanted to do to me. I no longer talk to Kelly or her parents, and when someone gives me a bad vibe, I instantly get the hell away from them. I'll be forever grateful to Charles because his words of advice not only validated that weird, creepy feeling that I got around Joe, but it gave me the urging that I needed to call the police. At the very least, it saved me from more uncomfortable times around the dinner table. At most, it saved me from much, much worse.